Yeah, I'm not really sure what the hell is going on. I may have to redo this shit if
Okay.
it doesn't come for some reason. Nothing is starting. Let me go to destinations and see what's going on.
Yeah, just it says we're live.
It does on StreamYard, but nothing is connecting unless I'm missing something here.
Uh,
Getter didn't connect. This is getting, dude. Then this, I spent last week yelling at Rumble. It says there's 408 people watching, so that has to be on YouTube. I spent last week yelling at Rumble. It's not Rumble. I don't think it's not. It's StreamYard. It's like having a hard time connecting to multiple destinations because I mean it should be on Twitter, right? I mean it should be on Getter right now, but for some reason let me look at let's look at YouTube real quick. Yeah, YouTube's the only one on. That's weird. YouTube's the only one that took it. I mean, what do you want to do? You want to roll or you want to restart it and do it everywhere?
we can roll on YouTube. That's fine by me.
Yeah, and I'll upload it to everybody else.
Yeah.
All right, let me just tell everybody what's going on. All right. For some reason, only YouTube took. This is crazy. Let me just get them the. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking right at it. I know everybody on YouTube is listening, and there's my voice right there. Son of a fanable. What are you gonna do? No, we could do. Everybody on YouTube's like, hey, I mean, we're good. All right, let me send it to Rumble. Rumble, you're gonna have to watch there. Getter's not even on, so I could disconnect. I'll just upload it when I'm done. All right, so let's start this. Let's get in the show here. It is what it is. Boom, here we are. So I spent a good hour bitching Ori and yelling at Rumble. And I'm like, but I don't think it is. I mean, I think it's StreamYard. Like, you know, obviously YouTube's a bigger name. For some reason, when this happens, it still connects to YouTube, but doesn't connect to everything else. So let's just roll with it on YouTube. Listen, I'm just getting right into this. And I was saying this in the back room before we went live here. What the hell is with everybody releasing polls that are conducted 8 days ago? Right. And here's the kicker to that. That's like when you and I were talking about a response bias bump. That's when Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Report said, if I would have stopped polling on Monday night, Harris would have had maybe a 2-point lead because of it. And that would have happened to us too if we stopped polling. That tracking poll by Morning Consult is old. It's old. What is going like? What is this just intentional now, Robert? It's just
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we'll see a lot of response bias driven polls throughout the month of August. I mean, you mentioned before, I don't know whether it's Republicans going on vacation or whatever it is, but there's been Democratic surges in August now going on decades.
Yeah.
So that's factor one. Factor two is, I mean, you couldn't have a bigger reversal from a response bias perspective. In July, you get the debacle of the debate for Biden. So
Right.
that's going to depress Democrats, excite Trump supporters. Then Trump survives an assassination attempt.
Of course.
That's going to intensify Trump supporters, depress Democrats.
Yep.
Then you have the Republican convention, which basically to their disgruntlement goes well, right? There were no big faux pas, nothing big they could hide. I mean, they tried to spin it, but there was really nothing for them to negatively spin other than claim the hillbilly elegy guy is weird. I mean, that wasn't going anywhere. So you have the three of the bigger events that could boost Trump enthusiasm and depress Democrats within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so they had to throw Joe from the train and pick up Kamala to try to reverse that. And they reverse it with and they get the reverse response bias. All those Democrats depressed for weeks, now excited. All the Republicans excited, now back to more norm. And consequently, you get the reversal side of the response bias. You know, Trump probably wasn't up really for. Harris isn't up at all.
That's what
in
I'm
my
trying
guess,
to tell people. They're not.
yeah. I mean, the median is going to be Trump by 2. Remember when USC dorm life back in 2016, they did a big study in 2012,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
said that, you know what, everything we're seeing is actually response
not
bias,
real.
that
Yeah.
conventions aren't really moving the numbers like people think, debates aren't
Right.
moving the numbers like people think. And so what they did is they pulled the exact same group of people all year. So they knew exactly what they were getting. So it was the same 2,000. And of course, what was fascinating is their line almost never moved. It was like Trump barely up all the way through. Like they just had like
And they
one,
did it
2
in 2012, silently almost.
yes,
This is
silently,
what people
because they
don't.
saw the same
It
thing.
was a
And then
test. It was a test. Mitt
and then the
Romney
media,
was
of
never
course,
ahead. Yeah.
the polling community bashed him for having Trump up at all, even though they were the most accurate poll of the
Right.
media university polls. So then they abandoned it. And it's too bad. Now we don't get their reliability of the data they had. But my guess is we're going to see a lot more of this. There's going to be more hagiographic coverage, more response bias pumping up throughout the month of August. The media pollsters and Democrats know there's the historical August bias in favor of Democrats. I
Let me
guess,
show that
dude,
actually. Let me show
is it
something.
Republicans go on vacation? What's your hypothesis on that? Democrats
They
are too broke to go on vacation?
Democrats like kind of live and breathe this stuff a lot more. It has always been
All
like
right.
that, and we're in the age of information. So, like, I don't believe anymore in not fully in like that Labor Day movement. I think that our methodology is designed to iron out because I do believe the Dorn Life and by the way, the Rand Corporation sponsored a lot of that back. It was behind the scenes work, guys, that you never saw. And in 2012, for instance, Mitt Romney was never ahead. It was always Obama +2 to Obama +4, barely moved. And I mean rounding because it was spot on. Obama 3 and change. I mean, spot on. And I remember that study like it was yesterday because if you remember, Robert, I came on the polling scene. They hated my guts because I said this is all fake. Whether you intend it or not, this is the artifact of the poll itself. Once people stopped having a universal way to reach people, right? Once pollsters stop that, the principles of randomization are gone. They're gone. I'm sorry. I hate to break this to everybody. And I know like the lawyer for Katie Hobbs tried to get me to say this on the stand, like he thought he was going to be all slick. And then I just twisted him up in a just litany of things he didn't understand. But the fact of the matter is, if you were all being reached by door knocking like Gallup did, if you were all being reached by landlines like Gallup did, then the polling industry, of course, is going to be more reliable. The minute then we started, oh man, there are people who call, who pick up cell phones at different rates. There are people who take online surveys at different rates. These groups don't even have landlines anymore. Once all of that started to happen, it became very tricky to be a pollster. And what Dornslight was trying to do was explain that actually, if you just get a very large representative sample and track them over time, what you will see is that the opinion changes very little, and you can predict how the outcome of the election is going to go. And I 100% believe in the value of what they were arguing. But not maybe. I mean, I took what my knowledge and my experience, and I took that and made that into my own thing. Of course, like my philosophy is somewhat different, so I have my own way of doing things, but I do it on the. It's not even an assumption. It's true. I do it based on the belief that their basic argument is correct. And what you're seeing right now is hands down a response bias. That's why during the Republican convention, after the assassination, our raw sample was R+4. Now our raw sample was far more Democratic. All right. So if you look at the New York Times poll, it was Trump +1 because the electorate was even. The YouGov sample that everyone is talking about, you have the CBS News poll that just came out yesterday. And I'm going to show you what Robert's talking about in a second, folks, because it's been going on for a long time. There's been a Democratic edge during the summer, and that's been the case for a very long time. Basically, though, that YouGov sample is the same sample that they gave to CBS News. CBS News did what they did with it. And now you have The Economist, which is awful. And they are going to do what they do. The data is the same. All right. It's not two polls out showing one. Harris was up by 1 nationally, tied in the battleground states in the CBS News poll. Now, today, there's a new poll. That's bullshit. It's the same panel. It's the same data set. And I know because they're buying from my vendor because they got too big for their own britches. So they are buying from my vendor. The difference is what The Economist is doing with that data when they get it. It is the same panel of responses. And they just decided that they were going to make it more democratic than CBS News did. That is what's going on. And I got to tell people too, real quick, before I show this graph to back up Robert's point. Stop using the term, because you're falling into the media's trap and they're making you look stupid. Stop using the terms oversampling and overrepresentation interchangeably. They are not. Robert and I have tried to explain this to you guys for a very long time. There is nothing wrong with oversampling subgroups. We do it all the time. In Florida, we have to oversample Hispanics because they're so diverse. You talk to 50 Hispanics, you're not going to get a representative sample because there are Puerto Ricans, there are Mexicans, there are Cubans, there are Venezuelans, there are El Salvadorians, there are Guatemalans. So we oversample them. There's nothing wrong with that as long as in the final sample they are represented and not under or over represented in the final sample. And that's where weighting comes in. People do different kinds: rate, propensity, modeling. We do a bit of a hybrid, but we're primarily a rake weighting technique. This is now I just wanted you guys to stop doing that, because every time you do that, you get hit by Nate Cohen like he just did to you now. All right, because you're wrong. And he's going to make you look foolish, and he's going to make you look stupid, even though you generally know what you're talking about. You're just using the wrong term. And there's nothing wrong with oversampling Democrats or oversampling Black voters, as long as they're not overrepresented. So you can talk to 6 points more Democrats in your sample. That's fine, as long as they're not represented as like a D+6 elector, which Kamala Harris is never going to get. Here is what this reminds me of, this race. Are you ready, Robert? Bush v. Kerry. Okay. This is so similar to me. It's not even funny. Bush led the entire year. Then the convention came and Bush had some hiccups in summer. There was tons of media hype and fawning over him. They were trying to make the war unpopular. He was, of course, this war hero, when in fact he wasn't. I know guys who served with Kerry, Navy SEALs, Chief Watson. He's dead now, unfortunately. Rick Marcinko. I sat around the table drinking with these guys and talking about John Kerry and how he performed in Vietnam. He literally was scared so shitless. He shot women, children, everything, and ran around like a nutcase. And they were afraid to say anything about it because he was the Democratic nominee for president. But that was his distinguished career. But you didn't hear about that in the media. You heard about what a great guy he was and how fair-minded, and he could be a warrior and a diplomat. So it hurt. And Bush had no experience, of course, in combat. So it was like they were trying to take that issue from him. Anyway, we get into the end of the summer. Bush retakes lead. It tightens again, because guess what? That lead for Bush was not real either. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. And it ends where the race started in February. Almost identical, Robert. I mean, this is what this reminds me of. Do you see the similarities?
Well, the other thing is, I emailed you a couple of links that I think are good to, because why do these numbers look like what they were a year out? Why, if you dig into the data and if you're able to get rid of response bias, in other words, one party being real excited and the other party not being, as there being an enthusiasm gap in terms of poll response, because enthusiasm gap in poll response does not equal enthusiasm gap in voter turnout, right? And it tends to be very temporal and momentary, and that's mostly what polls record. Most of the noise is that, the fundamental premise I've always had, and it's Brown conventions. Now, I mean, I think over the month of August, you're going to see a lot more of this. Hype for Harris, hype for Harris's VP choice, hype for the convention. The convention bounces used to be huge. Again, these convention bounces are purely response bias. All the Democrats are excited and the Republicans are not. And so you get and this is even within subgroups. In other words, the Republicans that are leaning Democrat disproportionately respond to the poll. Independents who lean Democrat disproportionately, right? So within the demographics, you get bad numbers. Walter, after the Democratic Convention of 1984, Walter Mondale led Ronald Reagan. After the 1988 Democratic Convention, Dukakis had, I think, a 17-point lead.
16.5 points. Yes, bro.
Over Poppy Bush. 1992, Bill Clinton had a 30-point lead over Poppy Bush after the convention. In 2000, Al Gore led by double digits after the Democratic Convention. And as Richard was just putting up, Kerry had a solid lead after the Democratic Convention of 2004. Remember, he shows up, I'm ready to serve. And all that.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, they're dead. You can't run on being more patriotic with a wuss like Carrie, that
Oh,
who I mean, literally has a sugar mama for a wife. I mean, come on.
the
The
Heinz family. Yeah.
Yeah, Teresa Heinz. That's how you avoid taxes, folks. Look at the Heinz. She didn't pay no taxes. That's how you work that business. Mitt Romney should have taken some lessons. But now I think the convention bounce has tended to shrink in past cycles. One, it's always been disproportionately Democratic. Why? Because it's the media hype that comes with the convention. But
Yeah.
it used to be, you remember the old days? We used to get like 3 hours of convention coverage on every major network every night.
Major event. Major
Yeah,
event.
I mean, I enjoyed that because you get to see all
Me
the
too.
different speeches and who are the upper. Now we get none of that.
Yeah.
I think they'll boost Harris much more than normal. So, Obama didn't get a huge bounce, et cetera. It's because they stopped doing major coverage, and Obama didn't need it, frankly. Harris does need it. So I think you're going to see him dial it up to the nines. If I was in the Harris camp, I'd want Harris up 8 to 10 points by the end of August. Knowing that the response bias issues, I would want her double digits up plus because
which Biden had in like the AP poll. He had a 14-point final lead. Just
Hillary
so
had it August 2016 up double digits in multiple polls. I remember right there.
12 points.
When those polls came out. Remember, that's what panicked Trump. That's when Trump was like, okay, I'm going to go straight teleprompters. I'm going to bring Steve Bannon in. Yeah. He did all that because he saw the double-digit leads. He was overreacting too. It's just the nature of the animal. But why is it that when you look at polling data almost a year out, you get better, more accurate, more predictive results than you do a few months out in terms of August, or even, as you were pointing out, some of the September, early October polls were all over the place. In 04, in 08, in 2012, in 2016, 2020. The reason is what we've talked about before, and the main basis of my entire election betting since I was a kid in presidential elections, which is the fundamentals. And there's two big fundamentals that are drive American presidential elections.
Yeah, let's get one of them up. Which one you want first?
The first one, the economy.
Do
people think the economy is good? Are they feeling good? Are they saying the economy? According to these so-called objective metrics, as you've been pointing out,
this guy,
these so-called fake modelers, these modelers are out there saying, "Oh, the economy is fair to neutral to positive, neutral to positive."
Nate Silver, folks, strikes again. Nate Silver arguing with me and Seth Levy.
I felt so bad. He's the Jim Cramer of political betting. Whenever Jim Cramer said something, go the opposite. He's like, it's amazing. He's become, I think he said something the other day. He said the economy or something, the economy's fine. Elon Musk was like, oh no, now we're screwed. And then like 24 hours later, whatever it was that he predicted went right down south.
And look at where we are today. Trading has been halted on the NASDAQ. Here's why this is so funny, folks. Because on Friday, after the jobs report came out, Seth Levy, myself, and Dave at Qantas Polls and News, he is at Qantas Polls and News on Twitter, immediately went after his stupid so-called model, which isn't a model, and said, this is your subjective opinion about the economy. This is an objective variable. You don't, and the same thing with Alan Lichtman and his stupid keys, right? Which he constantly falsely claims that he's predicted every major election since 1984. That is not true. He just makes up excuses for why he's wrong, like he did when Bush beat Gore. All right. So, but the popular vote. Okay. Idiot. We don't select presidents or elect presidents based on the popular vote. We elect them based on the electoral college. So your model should, of course, be tailored toward the electoral college, but you're a jackass. So I don't know what you're talking. You're making shit up as you go. So for instance, Alan, and this is the problem. Robert, in the modern election model and psephologist field, you can't have an opinion about these variables. We all have to agree on what is and what is not a positive or negative economy. 114,000 jobs, the loss of 10,000 manufacturing jobs, wage growth that does not keep up with the pace of inflation. Every economic indicator, including Gallup's confidence index, my registered voter economic confidence index, all negative, all foreshadowing a recession. A rise in unemployment so fast it triggers the Brom roll. So what are these people talking about? So what does he say? And as an excuse, folks, take one guess. But the stock market's doing well, and the S&P is in my model. Well, the S&P is down 2.5% today, and the volatility index, which was already up over 100%, is up another 43.2. So what on earth? It's like we can't argue about what is an objective fact versus his opinion. The economy is not good. And the best way you can do that is what Robert's showing you right here. Just ask people. Forget about what Nate Silver thinks. Forget about what Alan Lichtman thinks. These two are isolated. They're insulated from any economic turmoil whatsoever. They don't live in the real world. They don't. As long as Nate Silver keeps taking a paycheck to come out with fake models, he's good. He's always going to have a role. What do the voters think? And here's what Gallup found. Go ahead, brother.
Exactly. The two biggest fundamentals going into any presidential election in the United States has always been, do people feel good about the economy, and do people feel safe, whether it relates to domestic crime, domestic chaos, foreign wars? Those are the two big drivers. And the first one is so Gallup has this going all the way back to the 90s. They're how people feel about the economic conditions, and they combine the poll to create this sort of economic index. And when you dig into Gallup's data, and I've looked at analogous data going back further to give people an idea, if for the last year, especially if you look at working class Americans, because what matters in the economy is, as you note, is not whatever objective metric you choose to use, something like GDP that the government controls to a certain degree, things like the stock market, anything like that. Look instead at because all that matters in terms of people voting is what they think about the economy.
Right here.
And there you're looking at cost of living, and you're looking at how do they say the economy's good? Do they think conditions are getting better? Do they think their life is getting better? These core things. And to give people a sense of that data, when you combine, just going back to the mid-90s, in February of 2020, Trump had people had a more positive view of the economy than they had since Bill Clinton's 1990 boom, as was perceived at the time. Now, there were issues with that boom, but at the time, people were like, man, the economy's great. Nobody had done better in the economy, not George W. Bush, not Barack Obama, than Donald Trump leading into the pandemic. And as we pointed out at the time, Trump took away his Trump card by the way the response to the pandemic happened. And when I dug into these economic confidence, you're talking about some numbers that are the most right now over the last year amongst working class Americans. Their view of the economy is more negative than it has been at any time in any polling data I could find outside of 2008. And it's close to 2008 number negativity. Like
it says right here, let me just read it for people. Biden's worst number was -58 in June of 2022 because of the soaring inflation at that time, and it was the worst reading since 2008. This month is -35, which you would think is good, but in truth, because they did other things, it's the equivalent of how people. It's actually worse than how people felt going into their they had a prior index that they didn't keep. They did this one instead, but they're making an analogy to worse than how people felt before the 92 election going into Bush v. Clinton.
To give people an idea, Gallup's index has either been positive or no lower than 10, 11, somewhere in those range, just slightly negative in every presidential election other than 2008 until now. I mean, that's how bad it is. I mean, and then if you go back before then, you'll find that generally, because the variations of this poll have been done all the way back to the 1930s, in fact, the only time you'll find any public opinion data supporting numbers -30 or greater is 1932 and 2008. That's how negative working class voters are on this economy. And that's before today's news of the stock market. That's before the official employment number starts to spike. Now, as you pointed out,
Alan Lichtman just responded. He said Biden isn't the nominee anymore, so the bad economy won't hurt Harris. This is how fucking
you're kidding, right?
This
That's
guy
a parody.
is.
This guy's gonna torch whatever was left of his
Of his
reputation
credibility.
in this
He's
campaign.
done. He's done.
So on just the economy itself, there has never been, and now here you add another component. There is only one other presidential election where the high cost of living, there was a 1946 congressional election, off-year election. But putting that aside, there's only been one other presidential election where people were both negative on the economy and negative on the cost of living being a big issue. And that was 1980.
Yep.
So you're talking right now, you're talking about people who are as negative on the economy or close to it as they were in 2008, 1932, and on the cost of living, the worst it's been since 1980. This is an economic disaster for an incumbent party to be running it. And no incumbent party with this level of negativity about the economy has ever won the American presidency. Ever.
Dude, CBS News' poll, which sent all these fake right-wing influencers into a panic, right? All these guys just, they are as spineless as Republican legislators, which is why the media pulls this stuff over and over and over, because it works, because they cower like a bunch of little babies. They flatly asked people whether or not they viewed Harris and Biden's policies as the same. So how could Allen really say that? And honestly, how could these right-wing influencers believe this? Only 18% said they are mostly or entirely different. That's it. 64% said that they are mostly the same, and another 18. So we're looking at 82% who are saying they are either entirely the same or mostly the same, but they are the same. So how on earth,
Robert? The reality is it's similar to, like the 1946 a sweep for Republicans in the House for the first time at the time, in a long time, in the Roosevelt era. It's the incumbent party gets blamed for the bad economy.
Of course.
So it doesn't matter whether it's the incumbent running, it's the incumbent party that gets blamed. And I mean, that's what happened in 1980, you had the incumbent running. 1992, you had the incumbent running. But in 2008, you didn't.
Oh, wait.
John McCain had challenged George W. Bush, had run against George W. Bush. He wasn't even the vice president. He wasn't even tied. He was tied to being hostile and adverse to George W. Bush. And yet he got crushed.
Yep.
And
along with every other Republican in anywhere close to a battleground area. And I mean, there were Democrats who won races that they had no business winning. Mary Landrieu, right? Kay Hagan. I mean, my God. I mean, these were seats, and forget about the House. I mean, these were seats. I mean, the House had probably 30 seats that Democrats had no business winning. They were gone. So that's why Republicans, when they took back 60 plus seats in 2010, it was like not as big of a wave as everyone made it out to be. It was Republicans taking back seats that Democrats never should have won, but the environment was so bad. And by the way, regardless of how McCain was perceived before, they successfully tied McCain to the war. And then McCain made a dumbass statement about the economy, that he really isn't very good on the economy. So they made him essentially a third Bush term, and people rejected it. And I just don't see how, when you have the numbers, what I just showed you, and then look at this, man. Trump is plus 20 on Better Off on your finances. There's even with a more Democratic sample, I just don't see how you lose.
I mean, only 1 in 4 Americans think they're going to be better off with Kamala Harris.
That's it. I mean, one in 4.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so and so these economic numbers, these fundamentals that a lot of these modelers used to pretend to pay attention to, have been screaming for a year that Democrats are in a horrendous environment in 2024. And like we've seen today, it is likely to get worse over the next quarter. It is extremely unlikely to magically reverse. I mean, the closest we got to a magic reversal was Trump in 2020. Right, when these economic confidence numbers that were off the chart high completely imploded because of the pandemic and the response to it.
The pandemic,
and we were talking about at the time, Trump was doing enough to bring back confidence right towards the end. He still didn't get it to where it was before the pandemic, but he got it back to where he was in the game. And I mean, had he taken some of our advice, he never would have been in that position. But
He
that's
never
another
would have been
story.
in that position if you listened to us, Robert. Let's just play it. I'm not going to like pull any
Yeah,
punches here.
yeah,
If you would
no
have
doubt
listened
about it.
to us, there are folks. If you only saw the emails, Robert and I saying this is what it is now. This is what the polls say now. But someone who knows how to read the field and is worth their weight in salt is going to try to tell you what the polls are going to be like 6 months from now. And we're telling you they're going to hate you for this. You're slicing your Achilles heel. They are cutting it right at to the bone,
He,
you know,
he took his own
and
trump card and threw it in the trash.
he threw his own trump card in the trash, and he
And
did it because of the pressure.
for those people asking, what's the difference between 20 and 24? That's the difference. The
Yeah.
difference, and it's the difference we've been talking about now for 2 years. That especially in retrospect, as Trump got the economy back was getting it on track at the end of 2020. People have seen what life is like under Democratic regimes now under Biden. Some had to be reminded of the misery and the malaise and the stagnation under Obama
Yeah.
that they had that some had memory hold, but others amongst like millennials and Zoomers didn't remember that a whole lot.
Yeah.
And they got to see 4 years of Trump, which again at February of 2020, according to Gallup, this is this is Gallup's own data. Economic confidence was the highest it had been that they had surveyed in the modern era since the 90s. That's how positive people felt about the Trump economy pre-pandemic. And then and it has been as negative or close to it as 2008 under Biden. That's Kamala Harris's problem. That's the Democratic Party's problem.
Yeah, it is. There's no way around it.
Exactly. Now, the second issue, and we'll get into the third, how you can translate this into job approval rating.
Oh, wait. Yeah, don't go there yet. I just wanted to back you up on something that you said. So just to show people real quick, what Robert has said, something that's so important, he said before, and he said, these response biases don't just impact the party. They impact independents who lean one way or the other. And I want to show people back in the month of July and make sure I get the one right. Okay, yeah, here's the month of July. Independent identification. You can see here, who do you lean more towards? Oops, I did use the wrong one, but I'll read this to you. Who do you lean more towards? No, I would rather show people so nobody accuses me of just making shit up. Hold on one second. And because we do, when people ask, when we are asking people about their party, who do you identify with? When they say they're independent, folks, we always say, who do you share your views more closely aligned with? The Republican Party, Democratic Party, Republican Party, because it's rotated at random, so kiss my ass. But maybe you share little in common with either, or you shared them equally. Here was July. Okay, the poll that was just before the last one we did, and I had to add it, the variable independent identification. I had to add it. You can see here it is much more Republican. Not only that, but Republicans were much more certain to say that they were going to vote. Those are independents. So, okay, I want you guys to understand that. Now, watch this. This is this month. All right, where is August? Okay, I just want to make sure it's the last one in the tab. Now, when we asked people this month, who do you share more in common with? You can see, and is it on the screen yet? It is not. Sorry. Here it is. You can see it is much more Democratic. Okay. And Republicans were still more likely, or independents who say they lean towards the Republican Party were still more likely, but look how it's less now. And by the way, notice not only certain, but likely Democrats shot up to 21 and likely. But you can see there are more Democrats now than there were last month. That is also part of the response bias. It's just that you're getting people who are more inclined because their views are being affirmed. The events are affirming what they want to happen. So they're more likely to take the interview. All right. Now, we do things like Dorn's Life and try to obviously account for that, which is why I think we didn't get crazy. But I just wanted to back you up on that before we move, because you said that before, and we shouldn't have, we glanced over it. I think because people immediately will show the independent trend and be like, and then next month when Trump is leading again with independents, they're going to be like, oh, he won them back. He did not win them back. That isn't how it worked. And even Tip, by the way, they're right up today, shows actually Trump is still leading if you interview the same people who are independent. He is still leading. So, right. Go ahead.
It's the big fundamentals, the economy. It's the insurmountable one, in my opinion, for Harris on the Democratic side.
Man.
The the second aspect that that I've always used in my betting fundamentals is, do people feel safe? And that can be domestic crime, that can be domestic chaos, domestic unrest, that can be riots, that can be immigration. And then, do they feel safe from war? It can be part of that. Are they worried that World War III is right around the corner? Are they unhappy about some war we're involved in somewhere around the world?
Yeah.
So if you go back and look, and when people don't feel safe because they're unhappy with a foreign war, or there's domestic unrest that leaves them unsettled at a deep level, and to a degree, Biden benefited from this in 2020.
He did.
The pandemic created some domestic unrest that undermined Trump's peace and prosperity message otherwise.
Seasick voter, I called it back then, remember?
Yeah, absolutely. And if we go back in time, when has this happened? Well, we have in 1952. The Korean War was very unpopular. That's why it shows up in another polling data that used to be one they used to use a lot, that I'm seeing a lot of the modelers suddenly not talk about as much, which is the incumbent party's presidential approval. And again, 1952, Kefauver is running. He has no affiliation with Harry Truman other than the party. It didn't matter, when it came to the actual election day. Truman was getting hammered in his job approval because they were very unhappy with the Korean War in 1952, and his firing of MacArthur. And then you flash forward. The next time you get either major domestic unrest or a unpopular foreign war, or some combination of the two, it's 1968. That's what was sinking LBJ. That's why he had to withdraw from the Democratic primary process. Which, just briefly, by the way, that's the other thing. Lichtman and others this primary process can't be used as a metric. I used to use it as a metric because Biden closed it down. The Democratic Party didn't allow a primary competition.
That's right.
And I would argue the fact that it's not Biden is equal to having a significant primary challenge, which, let's be frank, he actually had. They just excluded Kennedy from running effectively. So, but just a little brief side bit on that point that Lichtman's ignoring.
And that's because he was the only funded, folks, because you have to be, when you're saying, like, is it a real challenger? They have to be funded and they have to have some measure of polling support. And of course, at Kennedy's peak, he was in the 20s, right? At the least, right? And he had money. And they just made sure he wasn't going to be on the ballot in key states, right? Look what they did. New Hampshire.
And Uncle Joe made sure Iowa and New Hampshire couldn't smack him around again.
Yeah. They actually robbed New Hampshire of their delegates, folks, just so you know.
And told Kennedy if he competed there, they would take away all his delegates. He realized the whole thing was rigged. So
it was not possible.
Yeah. And that's why you don't need a rig. Did Donald Trump need to rig the 2020 primaries? No, because he had 95% favorability.
He didn't care about Bill
Weldon. Biden had to rig him is a sign of weakness internally in the Democratic Party. It also shows up in his job approval amongst Democrats, which was the other metric I tended to use. But so, you have foreign war conflict, 1952. We get people don't feel safe again in 1968 with LBJ because of all the domestic unrest, the riots, crime surging, plus the unpopular foreign war in Vietnam. The next time you could say we get a little bit of that in 1976 due to the Watergate hangover.
But notably, look at where Ford was defeated. Okay, when Ford was defeated, he was hovering where Harris is hovering right now with her bounce back, and yet he was still defeated. He wound up leaving office with 53. But he was all the way up at 48% when that election was kicking off. And he just could not get out from underneath the Nixon shadow.
Yeah, it was just enough. And Carter was a unique candidate for that period of time that could unite the professional class Democrats and the Old South. It was not a sustainable coalition to govern, but it was a sustainable coalition to get elected the first time. And again, barely won that race. The 1980 of the Iranian hostages, which is a drag on Carter's approval. But then you don't get really anything quite like that until 2008. Yeah. But so if you look at 52, 68, 80, the 2008, what they have in common is the incumbent party loses, and from an electoral college perspective, like 68 might have looked close in terms of the final national popular vote. It wasn't in the electoral college. These are all electoral college blowouts. 100 plus electoral college margins is how bad the incumbent party loses, regardless of whether the incumbent party is running a vice president, the president, running somebody that's not even associated with the administration, it had no impact on their ultimate vote. If the economy stinks, they lose every single time. If there's an unpopular foreign war or worry about any kind of expanded foreign war, the incumbent party loses. And if you have domestic chaos or some domestic issue that's making people not feel safe or secure, then the incumbent party loses. What is unique about 2024 is this is the only election cycle in the last century where we have all three. We have a deeply, deeply unpopular economy. We have a multiple foreign wars that people are not happy about, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's in the Middle East, that has people on edge. And funding the Ukraine war was never popular, and it's just become more and more and more unpopular. And then we have complete domestic chaos and insecurity because of immigration.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we've never had all three. This
Alan
would be like
used to agree
1968, but combine 1968 and 2008, and you have 2024. Who in their right mind would think the incumbent party is going to win in that environment?
Alan Lichtman would normally have agreed with you once upon a time, yet he's making a lot of these calls that are, again, subjective calls. Like, so on the people feel safe front, do they feel like their foreign policy is being competently handled? He has this measure, is there any foreign policy disaster or conflict, right? And amazingly, Robert, Afghanistan wasn't a foreign policy failure. Like the war in Eastern Europe that we lost. It's over. Get over it. It's done.
And spent billions and billions and billions of dollars
and created inflation over it. That's not a problem. I mean, are you kidding me? Here is the CBS News poll, just so everyone, because I'm so tired of the overreacting. I'm going to show you the Electoral College map according to the CBS News poll that reported a Harris +1 as a lead for her. Now, when you get into the battleground states, I plotted them and I allocated the states as toss-ups that are 50-50, and I allocated the states Trump is winning to him and allocated the states that Harris is winning to her. And I'm going to show you it because I want you to see, with everything Robert just said, all of the challenges, she cannot lose one more state or else she has lost the election. And by the way, when Trump was up 1 point in that poll, they reported it Biden, Trump, neck and neck in close race. Now it's a 1 point lead, no different. And by the way, below 50, and it's Harris takes lead over Trump. So it's some bullshit that they pull. And you guys got a part of my language. Normally I don't curse this much. I'm just so over this. I really am over it. It's all these years, Robert, we've been doing this, and it's starting to wear on me now. It's starting to really just annoy me that people can be this dishonest. And worse, I think what annoys me more is a couple of things. One, that there are certain people, they just keep falling for it, and their grift is to scare the shit out of people, and that's it. And it's like they've never been right about anything. Like we have Twitter accounts, bro, that are panicking and like, you know, going nuts. They're still waiting for Ron DeSantis to win Iowa, which they said was going to happen, and they have the audacity to offer their opinion as if it matters at all. All right, this is the map. CBS News says that she's ahead in Nevada by 2. That Trump is ahead in North Carolina. He's ahead in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona are tied, which, as Robert knows, is asinine to begin with. If he is ahead in Wisconsin, he's going to at least win Pennsylvania. All right. Or typically.
Well,
but
you know,
I don't see.
Go ahead. Going back to 2020. You notice they finally have quit pretending that Iowa and Ohio are competitive.
Are battleground states. So we're making some progress here, brother. We're making some progress. Do you remember having to argue? Do you remember the day I was polling Ohio and Nate Cohen dropped that Biden +3? And I went on this tear. Do you remember that? I'm like, look at the raw data. It's Trump +10, dude. I have to wait favorably to Biden to get him anywhere near. And never would I've got him a lead.
It was part of how, despite what happened in the early morning hours after Election Day, still made money, and the people that were following me still made money on 2020's presidential election because the margin of victory in Florida, which you predicted, the margin of victory in Ohio, which you predicted, the margin of victory in Iowa, which you predicted, All were like cha-ching, 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 and those were big odds. I mean, to get like +7 or more, you were getting 2 to 1, 3 to 1 on your money.
Because Nate Silver had Texas, Florida, and North Carolina blue. He had Iowa purple, I think, or something. He had Biden with like a 55% chance of winning Iowa or 60% chance. Like, which it was insane.
Nate Silver was one of my biggest contributors because he would always get the odds wrong, and it would help me make money in the betting markets. So that's why I was thrilled when I saw he was back on the Harris bandwagon. I was like, hey, man. I mean, my first experience with Silver was betting 2012. And it was like, why is the betting markets, why do they have Obama at 60%? There's so much polling noise. It should be 50-50. And I was going to bet Barack Obama because of the fundamentals. The economy was up just enough. There wasn't any major domestic chaos. There wasn't a bad foreign war. Romney looked like a horrendous candidate amongst working class Northern independents. And, so it was like he checked, and I knew black voters were going to rally for the first time, black presidential candidate under attack. Right? I mean, older black women were going to pour out in ways they had not even voted before just to make sure Barack got in there. So I knew those fundamentals. I was like, why isn't he at 50 instead of 60? It was all because of Silver. And I read Silver's analysis and it's complete garbage. I mean, he's sitting there saying registered voter polls are much more accurate than likely voter polls. And I'm like, no, you moron. These polls are wrong because of response bias. These polls are wrong because they're not getting the disparate black turnout that's going to happen. But it's not because registered voter polls are magically better than likely voter polls.
The likely electorate was actually better for Obama. He was like, totally better for Obama. It was a G plus five.
He didn't understand any of it. I was like, he's like somebody who got a football game right, but he was predicting that they were going to win because they were going to pass all over him. And instead they actually won because they ran the ball all over him and their passing game stunk, and taking credit for the win at the end. So I told you guys. You're like, dude, you got it totally wrong. Your methodology was atrocious and abominable.
But listen, this is what bothers me though with the right. Like, so they fell right into his trap. And by the way, he's so corny. He has to trash me on his stupid card nobody reads anymore because he got fired from 538, and his old employer at 538 now aggregates our polls. So who's won the victory here, bro? Up yours, loser. He's still trying to remain relevant. That's what it is. He's trying to remain relevant when nobody really cares. And I tried to explain to the right, do not share his fake model because you like that Trump is winning right now. This is a trap. And in a month, when he has Harris with like a 70% chance to win the election, don't come crying to me about, whoa, look at what Nate's doing now. You should never have shared and given any credibility to what is not a model, Robert. It's not a model. She took the lead. The streams have crossed. The only streams that are crossing are in your bathroom with your boyfriend, bro, when you're sharing a same toilet bowl. You're so friggin' it's such BS. There was nothing, not the economy, not her little polling bounce fueled by response bias that would ever have made a real model change their forecast. Models that are real models do not gyrate like that. In fact, you want to know how you know the only one that has a real model is the one I'm looking at right now? They stopped conducting their model because several variables until they pick Harris as the nominee cannot be plugged into the model. So they're the only ones who have a real model. They're not just making it up as they go along. And I honestly think it will be more favorable to Harris when they pick it back up, but it will not be like Silver's fake model that gyrates everywhere. But here's the map. Let me just show people real quick. Give her Nevada. I mean, Robert, is there any state? He's at 2. This is the CBS News poll that got all the fanfare for Harris yesterday. This is the map the CBS News poll is showing. He needs one more state, Robert. He needs one more state. He could lose the rest of the Rust Belt if he gets Arizona.
And my math is just going back to the fundamentals. You're looking at this electoral college, looking at American voting history, looking at the demographics in these communities and constituencies.
It's going to look like
again, we have, in terms of the fundamentals, the election environment,
like that.
We have a combination of the domestic unrest and foreign war concern of 1968, combined with the perceptions of the economy of 2008. Those were two of the worst environments for a Democratic incumbent to ever run in. The incumbent party to run it, Republican incumbent in 2008. In both cases, it was not the incumbent president running, and they got crushed. It really wasn't competitive from an electoral college perspective. And so you look at that environment, and that environment isn't going to magically and radically change in the next 90 days.
It's going to get
So
worse. I mean, it's probably going to get worse.
much more,
The
especially
economy.
on both
Yeah.
sides it may. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, they're rattling the cage with Iran. They're rattling the cage about maybe we intervene in Venezuela. I mean, they're rattling the cage in parts of Asia. I mean, do we want a conflict on literally every single continent? I mean, is that what Harris is going to achieve and Biden going to achieve as he exits his presidency? While the economy, which is we've been talking about for 2 years, for working class people has stunk for a while now.
Yeah.
But it's about the floor is about to fall in. And people are going to see it in ways they can't ignore it anymore. But for working class people, they've already been screaming about the economy. If it continues an 08 path, which is what this looks like right now, people forget late 07, the economy wasn't that bad in public perception. It wasn't until late 08 it completely fell in. The floor just bam went
That's
under.
right. That's right. Yeah.
We're right now on an 08 economic path, and not only that, it was 08 at least was just a bad economy. It was not. I also can't afford the cost of living.
Yeah.
That was 1980. And again, what happened in 1980? Jimmy Carter led in every single poll in 1980. Folks.
USA Today. Carter up by 2. Their final poll. USA Today. I remember the paper like I have the headline still in my head. It's still there.
That's why the media was shocked on election night. Reagan won by 9 points.
Yeah.
The polls were off by double digits. Why? Because if you looked at the fundamentals a year before, people were unhappy about the economy, and the Iranian hostage crisis didn't help any. So now you combine high cost of living, very negative about the economy. People say the economy is poor. People say the economy is getting worse. People say their situation is getting worse. And here's the other problem. It's okay if the economy sucks if voters believe it's going to get a lot better.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
And they don't. And they're right. If you're a working class young person, you can't afford the rent, and you don't see you're ever going to be able to afford the rent. You can't afford to buy a home. Take buying a home. Buying a home is as psychological as it is material. It's about this is safety, this is security, this is stability, this is a family, this is retirement. This is all of those things for working class people. That is being stripped from them en masse. And so there's nothing that they have to look forward to. And you're seeing that in the data, and we've seen it for a year. And that's why I looked at Marist's poll. How did Marist have the Marist, which historically had Biden up big in Pennsylvania, had Trump up recently. And I looked, I was like, okay, I have their crosstabs because at least they published those. And I was like, where did the numbers move? It's all working class voters. It's all non-college voters. There's a 20-point erosion and that was for Biden. With Harris, it's going to get worse.
Rui Teixeira just wrote this.
Goodwill amongst older working class retirees and boomers.
Rui Teixeira just wrote this on the Liberal Patriot, and he is one of the co-authors of the Emerging Democratic Majority. For people who don't know that, we just went over this on Friday on Inside the Numbers. He is like, whoa, hold the phone. Because he just doesn't believe the polls. And he's like, hold the phone. Kamala Harris is not putting together either the Obama or the Biden coalition. Forget about it. She's doing worse than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, but worse than Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Obama among women, among college-educated whites, among white working class voters of all colors, and of course, among men. And by the way, among black voters and Hispanics, she is still doing significantly worse among these groups. And let me just ask you this, because this is why the working class is just so important when we're looking at the map we're looking at right now. If CBS News poll is close to accurate, let's just say and by the way, most of our vote preference margins are they're pretty close to CBS. And the only difference is we don't have a Democratic heavy electorate. That's the only difference in both of our polls. We have a slight, tiny D plus 0.4 or something. It's even, right? They're not. They're D plus 4, I think, or something like that. That's the only difference. But let's just say they're right, Robert. And Wisconsin still, because of that margin, they put, and because it's less, first of all, there are less minorities in Wisconsin, folks, than in Michigan and Pennsylvania. So that's why they have both of those toss-ups. The map you're seeing right now is the CBS News poll, okay? Wisconsin, because of Trump's performance with white working class, still goes into Trump's column. but they have voted the same, even though it's been very close in some elections. In 2020, Wisconsin looked like it was going to vote differently than Pennsylvania and Michigan. It almost went for Trump. And let's be real, it did without indefinitely confined status being exploited and abused. All right. And then in 2016, Michigan was very, very close, 10,000 votes, but it still voted for the same person, even by a smaller margin. It did, as the other two states. 1988 is the last time the states split their vote. Wisconsin went to the caucus. The other two went to Herbert Walker Bush. But in this election cycle, being that they have voted the same, as the three states have voted the same for the last 8 presidential elections, even when it was close, which one do you see any of them bucking the trend? And again, we're doing this thought exercise, folks, based on the CBS News poll, because this is like pushing a narrative. Do you see them, Michigan or Pennsylvania, like both of them bucking the trend? Like, if Wisconsin goes for Trump, like, do you still see Harris holding on to Michigan? Like, what do you think about this? Like,
The only way, I mean, traditionally, you've got very comparable demographics in all 3 states. Evangelicals compared to the nation are underrepresented in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. They're more Catholic states and more moderate religious beliefs, or non-evangelical religious beliefs. A lot of working class ethnics. The ethnic profile varies. You might get more Italian and Irish out of Pennsylvania. You might get more German and Norwegian and Dane out of Wisconsin. You have a little bit more of a Yankee population in parts of these states, but all of these states had some substantial Yankee population back in the day.
Absolutely.
In terms of original settlement patterns.
Yep.
But really, they vote alike because they're a lot of working class white voters who are religious but not uber religious. And so they tend to vote together. The only way these states diverge is if there's a geographic rural-urban split that's really big. In other words, if urban areas trend heavily Democratic, and while rural areas trend Republican, Wisconsin is a 2/3 small town, small area state. Michigan and Pennsylvania are about half. So if you would need to get like the suburbs or and a particular kind of suburbs, I would call it just big metros. You would need big metros to trend majorly Democratic, and that offset any rural movement in order to get divergence. And it's just extraordinarily unlikely because you've got very similar voters. In other words, the voter in Macomb County isn't all that different than the voter in rural working class Michigan. And the voter in South Milwaukee, in Kenosha and in Racine, isn't all that different, and in Green Bay from the smaller town working class voter, unless you're talking about the Norwegians on the western side of the state. The only other difference is that Wisconsin historically has a stronger anti-war bias than Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, because of the progressive roots. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
And those progressive roots are in working class Norwegian country.
Sure.
That like you dig in, like one of my favorite ways you can really pick that apart is 2000 to 2004, and you see where Bush lost votes. And it's almost all the western part of South and western Wisconsin, where the Norwegian population is overrepresented because we got the populist version of the Norwegians. We got the rural working class versions, whereas a lot of the Swedes that came over, we got the Stockholm types, unfortunately.
More liberal.
Yeah, much more liberal. That's why Minnesota trends more liberal.
That's right.
That's why other parts of Wisconsin that are, like Madison and those areas trend more liberal.
And then in the Northwest too, you have those 3 counties, Ashland, Bayfield, Douglas, which, by the way, Trump and Johnson break the 40s in when other Republicans don't. They're mired in the low 30s. So they do much better there. And that's like an area where I wonder, how would she do in lumberjack country, Robert?
Well,
I don't see
if we're going to highlight specific sub-demographics, where I see trouble for Harris is, I think, areas that, like, for example, I thought Trump could break through because in February of 2020, he was on pace to break through in places like Northwest Wisconsin, the Iron Range of Minnesota, certain working class areas of Michigan and eastern Pennsylvania. And Biden did much better than I anticipated in those regions. in part because at least my interpret, well, twofold. One part was Trump took away his Trump card and didn't get enough of those voters back by
And
election day. He
killed
was on pace to.
killed the
And then the
economy.
other was, of course, some of those voters didn't even know they voted for Joe Biden, but did.
Right.
There's that aspect too. But like, do you see Kamala Harris playing well in the Iron Range of Minnesota? Do you see her playing well in Upper Michigan? Do you see her playing well in Macomb and Monroe counties, the working class areas, old auto country?
Yeah.
She's going to play well in auto country. Miss, I want to be the Green New Deal. Miss, I love trade deals that ship your jobs away. The Miss California. I want everything to be an electric vehicle, not your old engine vehicle. So she's going to play well in the iron. I mean, she's just anti-industry. I mean, this is where J.D. Vance is doing a very good job honing the issues. And Trump is really on top of it today. He's already calling it the Kamala crash. That was smart. But hammer immigration, hammer all the disaster of the foreign wars and insecurity, hammer the fact that she, like Joe Biden, is AWOL while the world burns, but also keep hammering she wants to screw you on jobs. She doesn't care about your jobs. She doesn't want you to have auto jobs. She doesn't want you to have steel jobs. She doesn't want you to have oil jobs. She doesn't want you to have natural gas jobs. She doesn't want you to have fracking jobs. She doesn't want you to have mining jobs. She doesn't want you to have jobs, period, because down deep, she doesn't like working class men. That's the subtext. She is the cat lady president. And
that's why he was, by the way, that was what Vance said, and the media jumps on. And I actually think that's some of those things are like reinforcement, subconscious reinforcement of what people are going to think about Harris. I mean, so it actually works. It's going to work, and they don't really understand that that's going to work. But like, I'm highlighting a couple of counties as you're talking. That working male vote in Wisconsin, a state, by the way, folks, that can break 50-50 by gender. And in fact, Trump drove men to almost 51 in 2016. So it's not one of those states where it's like 47% male, 53% female. It's not. It's a 50-50 gender state, and men vote at higher rates. Look at Sauk. Trump carried Sauk. It's small county, but 36,000 votes. But Trump carried Sauk against Hillary Clinton. And this is the kind of voter Barnes and I are talking about that Biden did better with than I think any modern Democrat could have, honestly. I think he surprised a lot of people. Another one is Rock County, and then next to it, Greene, which Trump can and did carry in 2016 and lost to Biden, and Dorr, which has a bit of a, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a Vermont liberal kind of population in rural, like a Vermont rural liberal.
It's got a vacation area. There's an affluent part of Dorr County.
There's an affluent part of Dorr. Thank you. Yeah. And then this is Lumberjack, Northwestern Lumberjack, talking about that butts up against Lumberjack anyway. But Ashland, look at Trump. Even when he lost, still 44% of the vote in Ashland. Bayfield, just about 42.5%. Douglas, 44.4%. These are the numbers roughly that Johnson got when Johnson still held on. Why? Because Johnson did a little bit better in areas of Dorr. He did a little bit better in Sauk. And of course, there were out around Green Bay, and Waukesha is starting to get a little bit wobbly for Republicans. But this is the kind of a Democratic nominee like Hillary Clinton who will turn these people off, and they will go back. I'm not saying it'll be an affirmation of the Republican Party. It's just she's too much for them. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Too much. And I'm telling you, it didn't shock me.
The worst of Barack Obama and the worst of Hillary combined.
Combined. This is what people don't understand. This is the Democrats. This polling bump is the Democrats being just more excited that they don't have an animated corpse. But listen to this tip. I wanted to read this. This is the independent vote that they pulled from the prior month. Trump still leads with them. He maintains a slight lead, which is about the same that we had, a couple of points among voters who voted differently. So these are the true kind of like persuadable voters. They're much closer than the independent margin, because the independent margin can change along with the response bias, because you can just have more independent leaning Republicans that month, or independent leaning Democrats, like I just showed you in our crosstabs. They were last month, there were more Republican independents, more Republican leaning. And then this month, they're far more Democratic leaning. So Trump's lead with independents went from 7-2. That's why. But if you just highlight those voters that have been telling us, I voted for Biden or I voted for Trump and I may switch and swap, but those are really those true swing persuadables. And it's still 2-1 for Trump. It's still 2-1.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I mean, if you voted for Biden, you're voting for Trump. I know Morning Consult found something else, but I'm really getting very, very, I'm getting more than skeptical of Morning Consult. I think that there's something.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna. Well, I mean, it may not torch their reputation because what if you're Morning Consult and you looked at pollsters that got things really wrong over the last multiple cycles, but got it wrong in favor of the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
they still got checks most of the time.
Yeah.
So I think, whereas, if you poll independently for ABC, even if you've been polling for them forever, all of a sudden you're no longer used as much.
Yeah.
If they'll look at CNN, you create a couple of good Trump polls, and all of a sudden you're gone.
Yeah.
Even
ABC,
though those
Gary Langer, he's gone, brother.
Langer gone from ABC, been there forever. CBS
Forever.
I mean the people at CNN gone. That have been there for a long time, gone. So if you're a Morning Consult, you want your check written. This is the narrative people want, and so you're going to put it out there and figure that it won't matter if you're badly wrong. Now, I think they're going to get the problem for the polling industry is going to be they got 2020 wrong.
So bad. I got their record up right now
because
of
Biden sneaking in at the end, but their margins were way off, all over the place, way off in 2016. Can they really afford a disaster of 2024? So we'll see whether they're willing to sustain this. Just response bias will give them the opportunity to pump Harris up for the rest of August. But
what are they going to do after that? You know what I mean?
Correct, what do they do in mid-September? What do they do in early October? Now, there's some people that believe that the vice president can change that. And the problem is there's really no history of people voting for a vice president.
Thank you.
A vice president increases. The only thing, I mean, for Trump, I thought he had unique needs. He needed to pick a VP that was not going to get him killed. That was going to be life insurance. He needed a VP that was going to reinforce populist policies and personnel once he wins. That was priority 1 and 2. And to me, priority 3 was where can a VP be useful? Where's the only historical example of a real VP bump? It's when the VP reinforces your brand in a unique way. And in my view, the only real effective VP choice ever was 1992, Bill Clinton picking Al Gore, because it reinforced they were a Democrat. Yeah, Southern We're Southern Democrats. We're Southern Democrats. We're Southern white male Democrats.
Yep.
And Tipper helped with the Hillary problem because Tipper was much more the traditional kind of figure of a first lady kind of figure, so that it took the edge off some negative reactions to Hillary. So it was, and remember they did their bus tour and they went and campaigned all together. And it wasn't a coincidence they had Tipper there all the time.
It was smart though. It was.
Oh, brilliant. Politically brilliant. Because it reinforced the brand. What it is because it's not because anybody said, oh, I'm going to vote for Al Gore now. I'm going to vote for Clinton Gore because I want Gore for vice president. It was because Gore reinforced Clinton's brand, reinforced Clinton's message. I'm a different kind of Democrat. I feel your pain every day.
I feel your pain. And here's a funny thing about this, and just so people know, that's we have a list of the worst pollsters of various years. This is 2020. As you can see, Reuters is also on it. Reuters is an awful poll. This is Morning Consult. And just before we move on, because I will also tell you that the following cycle in 22, our generic ballot was Republican plus 4. They won by 3. Theirs, Morning Consult, was Democrat plus 6. They stood out like a sore thumb in that average, along with, there was like one other person that had Democrat plus 2. I want to say it was like Data for Progress or something. And if I'm wrong about that, I apologize to them, but it was like some Democratic leaning, not leaning, they're a Democratic left-wing polling firm. But look at some of it's not only the battleground states. Folks, look at South Carolina. They said South Carolina was going to be very close, like within 6 points. Trump thumped Biden in South Carolina. Texas was tied, I kid you not, in the morning consult poll. In Wisconsin, Biden was up by 13 points. Folks, he won by 0.6 of a percentage point. Pennsylvania was, and this is why I warn people, Robert, like Pennsylvania polled more Trumpy than Wisconsin did, and Wisconsin voted more. Wisconsin voted more for Trump. With Michigan as well, Morning Consult was not alone in finding sometimes Michigan being closer than Pennsylvania. God, man, my daughter's smoothie, she'll kill me if I don't eat it. But it's killing me. But then anyway, you can see here it was Michigan was Biden +7. That was a less than 3-point race. Ohio was Biden +2. God, I kid you not, dude.
Oh yeah, well, because in the betting markets,
+2.
In the betting markets, they had Texas dead even, they had Ohio dead even, they had Iowa dead even, they had North Carolina dead even, they had Florida dead even, and that's why I was able to bet margin of victories and bets that just cash.
Florida Biden +7.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean multiple
10.5-point miss.
And you know these are coming back because they're showing that they'll play into response bias rather than push down against it. And they're showing that they will, Morning Consult is leading the way at getting coverage by pushing a Harris narrative. The problem is this is literally the worst electoral environment of any incumbent party to run for office outside of 1932 and 2008. I mean, you couldn't, and there's arguments it's worse.
I was just going to say, I mean, it could end up really bad. I mean, this. We may get some like bargain buying tomorrow with the market because folks, when rich people, when they see markets tank like this, they go for opportunities. So like you may see volume increase and bargain buying happening that props the market back up a little bit. But if the Fed comes out and says there's no rate hike, there's no rate cut coming, I mean, oh my God. I mean, Robert, they're really in a rock and a hard place here. If they keep rates as they are, forget about raising them. They risk more bank failures right before a presidential election because we have bank failures teetering right now. If they cut it, it's going to look political. That's number one. And number two, I mean, it's not sustainable. It's inflation.
It's affirmation the economy sucks.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, whenever the Fed is cutting
they risk
rates,
inflation and they risk runaway.
There's still the inflation risk. And the reason why you never want to see the Fed cutting rates if you're wanting the economy to be good is the only time that happens is when the economy sucks.
Yeah,
because the Fed is always late. The Fed has almost never been ahead of a bad economic turn. They usually are late to raise rates and they're late to drop rates. That's just who they are. And so that's why in 90 days is Kamala Harris going to solve the immigration problem?
Right.
In 90 days, is she going to get there to be less foreign war, no conflict in the Middle East, no conflict in Europe, no efforts to overturn or intervene in Venezuela or other governments? I mean, like somebody mentioned the reason why the Israeli war is unpopular for Democrats is it's lose-lose. You either lose the progressive left and the Muslim vote, or you lose Jewish votes.
Yeah, so, let's talk about Shapiro here and the impact Shapiro has here, bro.
Yeah, we have Shapiro to be probably does help with. I think it's funny what Obama's worried about. I think Shapiro. I think what you picked up, they may be picking up from some of the data as well, which is they have an unusual. I mean, they usually win Jewish vote, which is overwhelmingly secular, taking out Orthodox Jews in parts of New York City, by 4-1, 5-1 margins. And they're getting numbers in the 60s, 50s. I mean, you had all down to 40s. I mean, grant small sample and all that, but we're seeing a trend either way, right? What you detected was a trend.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because in states like Minnesota, in states like Michigan, to the degree they're concerned with down ballot issues, New York and New Jersey, the places where you have the most Muslim votes is also where you have the most Jewish votes in places like New York and New Jersey. And they can't afford down ballot, some of the House races and other races, major erosion of Jewish vote. So take Michigan. There's still more Jewish vote than Muslim vote. The Muslim vote's very concentrated in Dearborn, but if you go into the religion demographics, which you can get from different places, there's still more Jewish voters and pro-Israel voters than there are Muslim voters. And now you have the progressive left, but that's going to be around the University of Michigan, right? Minnesota may be a factor if you're thinking Minnesota. But if you pick Waltz, that means you're losing, right? When you're defending yourself by picking Minnesota, you're picking the one state Walter Mondale won in 1984.
Dude,
that's your border wall. That's your border wall after you've been defeated.
Her own poll has her down. I saw it last night. I'm just telling you guys. Her own poll has her down in Pennsylvania to Trump 48-47. Okay, I saw it last night. Somebody leaked it to me. I wanted to put on locals so bad, but they begged me not to do it because they were afraid they were going to get caught. All right, they are down. So if you are thinking of, I have to pick Shapiro, and that'll help me win Pennsylvania, which is BS, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But the only way it can help you is if he uses his power as governor to steal the election, which he will do anyway, whether he is the vice president or not. So him picking is not going to win over the voters that made him successful in 22. I'll show you that in a second. Stand by. But if you're also talking about Waltz, you're thinking, I may, under the right conditions, lose a state that is a lean blue state. Does that exude confidence? Like, because right now I know it is down to Waltz and Shapiro. Right? That is, unless there's this campaign to get rid of Shapiro right now, and that's because he has a lot of baggage, which Jack Posobiec is going to dump when it comes out, right? But and it's Democrats who are doing the leaking right now to try to get him to stop. If you think that you have to pick Waltz, not Shapiro, because he doesn't give you a problem with the demographics that Robert was just talking about. He did obviously fairly well when he ran for governor, which governors have no predictive value when it comes to presidential vote. But, basically what does that tell you though, Robert? Like, it tells you she's afraid of that this race could go back to where it was before all the propaganda and hype, and that she could be on the verge of losing Minnesota. Because I'll also break the news to everybody. The round of polling that was done before they really waged the coup, that weekend Biden was not going to leave until the polling came in and Harris threatened the 25th Amendment. That's what happened behind the scenes. She said, here's this new polling. I do better than you. I'm still losing. And by the way, Minnesota was not 5 points. It was not 6 points. She had like a 1.5, 2-point lead in their polling in Minnesota. That's it. So regardless of what you see in the field, they're not going to make decisions based on the CBS News poll, the New York Times poll. They're making decisions based on the polling that they are doing in these states. And that tells you she's worried about Minnesota, Robert. That's what that tells you.
They used response bias to drive Biden out, right?
They did.
That's the irony, is because Joe Biden himself doesn't watch People's Pundit, is why he stepped down from the running for re-election.
If he did, he would have known
them for BS polls. He'd have been like, get out of here. Nobody in the Iron Range is picking Kamala over Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe can still deliver the goods. You know what I mean? If I'd been in the Democratic camp, that would have been my advice. I think she underachieves there, and the VP doesn't solve that problem. No. The VP doesn't deliver. He doesn't deliver nationwide because nobody votes for the vice president.
Let's talk about some, and then we'll look at Shapiro's performance, because I want to show people this is what they're claiming. All right, let's look at Shapiro first real quick, because I could do it real quick. Yeah. Here's Josh Shapiro's performance according to the exit polls. He won 16% of self-identified Republicans, and he won 64% of independents. That's not everybody who voted in 22. All right, many of them just stayed home. He won men only by 2, and he won female 63 to 37. He won the white vote. Now let's look at the burbs. Urban, 72% of the urban vote. He won the suburbs by 5, which, by the way, in 2020, Donald Trump won in the state of Pennsylvania. Contrary to popular belief, he won the suburbs by 3 points. But Mastriano did really bad in rural America. Remember, our poll in Pennsylvania showed him like losing Dutch country, and he did lose Dutch country, which a lot of people thought, called my poll shit because of that one demographic. And the truth is, it was real. But let's go down for a second and let's
And for those that don't remember, Mastriano had absolutely no money. The Republican governors cut him off.
They screwed him. Yep.
The media completely abandoned him. The Republican Party down ballot provided no institutional support. So he might as well have been a non-factor. And he was completely demonized by the press in Pennsylvania. Whereas Shapiro just got all this favorable hagiographic coverage.
Yeah.
So it created this wild disparity that you don't normally get. So Shapiro ran in the best possible electoral environment, and yet he didn't show the kind of strength you would expect in places like amongst men, amongst suburban voters, the places he's supposedly going to help Kamala Harris. He wasn't uniquely strong against a uniquely weak opponent in 2022.
He won 15% of voters who voted in 22, but also voted in 20 for Donald Trump. He won 15% of Trump's vote. He won an equal percentage, an equal share of the vote that views Donald Trump favorably, which tells you two things. One, it's hard as politicos to understand this because most of the time, if you're a political junkie like we all are, you're likely to be partisan. All right. So you don't see the world the way the world is, which is that there are voters who will vote for Donald Trump and Josh Shapiro. They absolutely existed. There were many of them. All right. And then two, it also tells you that it's not vote Trump had in 20 and lost between now and then. These people still view Donald Trump favorably. If it is a choice between Kamala Harris with Shapiro on the back ticket and Donald Trump, who they already voted for, many of them twice, they're going to vote for Donald Trump. They're not going to vote for Kamala Harris and overlook everything they didn't like about Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden because Josh Shapiro is at the bottom of the ticket. That is not how it works. Paul Ryan not only could not deliver the state of Wisconsin for Mitt Romney against Barack Obama because they weren't voting for Paul Ryan, they were voting for Mitt Romney. He couldn't even deliver his own congressional district. He was reelected easily in the first congressional district, and those voters voted for Barack Obama for president. So understand, they grabbed the ballot and they said, top of the ticket, Barack Obama. It also said below, where they didn't check, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, their own effing congressman. All right. Below that, they saw Paul Ryan running again for re-election in Congress, and they checked for Paul Ryan. They are true persuadable voters, so it's a very good example. The first district, or at least in 2012, they're a perfect example of the Obama-Trump voter that has shifted over these years. So they were willing to vote for a Republican down ballot and let Paul Ryan go back to Congress, but not for president. The strongest case, I feel like we have to repeat ourselves every 4 years, Robert. We're doing this. Here we go. Lyndon Baines Johnson again, 1960, JFK, Texas. JFK's daddy stealing votes in Cook County and West Virginia was much more impactful than LBJ was for Texas. All right. And by the way, it was very close in Texas.
And the Kennedys thought that themselves, but because they were going to jettison LBJ in 1964. So they really didn't need him. So, yeah, I don't see. I would say from a branding perspective, there's the old Norman Mailer principle about vice presidents. He says you need a good name, right? It's got to sound like a law firm, a sophisticated kind of firm, a business. Somebody be like, oh yeah, that's Trump Vance, both 5 letters. They Trump advancing. There's nice alliteration there. I mean, now
even though Biden were both 5 letters, you know what I mean? Like they
same thing.
They figured the rule.
Who do you think was I think the worst named choice for vice president ever?
Well, Lieberman was not great. Okay, let me just say.
Which, by the way, we're going to get to it. Shapiro.
Yeah, we have to talk about this in a second. We cannot ignore this.
But think about it. You need a name. You need a name that doesn't communicate something negative and about you and something negative in general. And I remember explaining this in 2016 because I just read the Mailer books, and I was like, Hillary Clinton announces she picked Cain.
Oh, right.
Cain for
That's
vice president.
right.
Like Cain
That's
and
right.
Abel. Like I need a Cain because my health is bad. I was like,
Who,
you
by
could
the
not
way,
have-
almost lost his state to Donald Trump anyway. Tim
Yes.
Kaine being on the ticket didn't help her hold Virginia. It was way closer than they thought it was going to be. It was closer with the senator from Virginia on the ticket. It was closer than when Barack Obama and Biden were running against Mitt Romney. Well, I mean, what the hell? And McCain, for that matter. I mean, this is like, it didn't help. It was minus 2.2 points. I mean, it doesn't matter. People don't vote for the vice president. The top of the ticket has to carry it. Yeah, but you're right. It
So
can
how
hurt
does
you.
the vice president impact the branding
Yeah, it can hurt
of the president?
Yeah.
That's how you should look at a vice presidential
Dan Quayle.
choice from an electoral perspective, independent of other things. Like, again, I think Trump needed life insurance. J.D. Vance gave him the best chance of that. Trump needed someone who was going to push populist policies and personnel. J.D. Vance gave him the best chance of that. But Trump reinforces Vance reinforces the Trump brand to key working class voters, which not only in his life story, but he's good at hammering home the messages over again. Border out of control, chaos globally, Kamala AWOL like Biden, the economy sucks. You're not going to have a job if Kamala Harris is president because she hates working class men. Right? I mean, that's basically the Vance says it basically at every stop. But if you look at, so who could Harris pick that could reinforce the brand? Now, by the way, if she wanted really to help in Pennsylvania, there's only one candidate I think would help her in Pennsylvania. I think it's Bob Casey. Because there's people in that state that still think that kid is the old man. It drives me nuts. Actually, remember, I had great respect for the old man. One of the last pro-life Democrats, old school. This guy's nothing like that. Nothing at all like that. But she won't put him on there because he's still, even though he's nothing like the old man, he's still not kosher in D.C.
You think Cole McCormick's got any chance against Bob Casey? Let's be real.
I run into older voters in Pennsylvania that think he's the old man. So yeah, it's Kamala Harris will give him his best chance of that. Aligning Casey with Harris will destabilize that kind of voter, that older boomer voter that love the old man, that thinks the kid is just a chip off the old block. I mean the way Russell Long kept winning votes of old voters that loved Huey and Earl, and it's like Russell was nothing like Huey and Earl. God bless him.
Hedge fund guy, and I know my boy Sean.
I know.
He knows.
Pennsylvania keeps recruiting terrible candidates on the Republican Party, right? They either got the lone the lone gunman, single bullet guy, from Philly, or they got these candidates, or they get sort of so far outside the mainstream of Pennsylvania politics that they can't get any institutional support and get totally abandoned. Or they get these really mediocre, Oz.
Vanilla.
Totally. I mean, that guy just vanished.
He should have won. He just couldn't get the turnout that he needed. I mean, he honestly should have won that. People just didn't vote for him.
The Trump support down the stretch. I mean, there was a way to do that he just didn't do.
Yeah.
And similar with other aspects. So Democrats have benefited in Pennsylvania, in my view, from below average quality Republican candidates.
But the party's in shambles too. Let's get real. It's like there's still a bunch of people who are like thwarters. I know. I spoke to, and I don't know if I want to throw them out there, but I had several friends, but also clients, and there were people at their events outwardly, and I'm talking about Republican events, folks, to support these candidates. There were people outwardly stating that maybe I'll vote for Oz, but I'm going to vote for Shapiro for governor. Like, there were huge numbers of activist Republicans telling me that. And by the way, Shapiro won 15% of Republican men. He won 18% of Republican females. But guess what? They would all vote for Donald Trump. Right. So again, like the point is, like,
it's not going to help there. No. I mean, I think in terms of reinforcing the brand, I think he's a problem because he reinforces some of the worst aspects of the brand.
Yeah.
One aspect, that cackling stuff, and he has some physical demeanors that
he's also shorter than me, Robert, for Christ's sake.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
Not exactly a huge guy.
He's a little fellow. That won't help. I think he won't show well against Vance. He's kind of an annoying debater.
He's going to stand on a step stool when they debate. I'm serious because I've stood next to JD. I'm short to JD. I mean, not super short, but like Shapiro is short for me. Shapiro, I mean, I tower over Shapiro by like 3 inches, and I'm not a big dude. Are they going to sit Shapiro on a step stool if
I
there's a
would.
vice presidential debate? They're going
I
to
would
have
have him sitting
and
down.
then
I wouldn't have him standing up.
beg the media not to pan so you can see his like shiny
Well, and if
shoes.
you're JD, you know what you do.
Around.
When you walk out, you go right up to him to shake
Just
his
shake
hand.
his hand. Yeah,
Right.
that's it.
Hey, little buddy, how you doing?
What's up, little guy?
Exactly. So Trump would do that.
He did.
I mean, he would show it off in big ways. He loves doing the handshake imagery.
Yeah.
And I think I get Obama's concern. It's funny that it's coming from Barack Hussein Obama of all people,
Who does not think Kamala Harris can win.
He picked Biden. Biden. Why? He picked Biden to ameliorate the Barack Hussein Obama brand.
Yes.
The part of the brand that people are like, you seem kind of foreign, not really American.
Calm fears. He picked Joe Biden.
Exactly. It was branding. It wasn't anything specific. Biden didn't bring votes. Biden didn't bring policy expertise. Biden did bring some of the old Democratic political machine that Obama needed a bridge to. But fundamentally, Biden, in terms of branding, was you can be chill about Obama because Biden would, shade. Cool. See, everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be radical. It's not going to be dramatic. It's not going to be.
He's a well-groomed black man, right? What did he say? And then proceeded to make fun of Indians to make you think that actually Indians are the weird ones. Obama's pretty American. I mean, that's what he did there. That's what he did. And now, by the way, there's an Indian American nominee. It will be an Indian American nominee.
I mean, I do like the meme. The economy is so bad that even Joe Biden got replaced by an Indian.
Oh my God! Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so good. That's so
good. But if you're just looking at demographics, if you're Harris, you come across as kind of foreign, right? You grew up in Canada.
Indeed.
Your parents were both not from America. One of them was a communist. Her father was a communist, a Marxist professor from Jamaica,
who disowned her now, by the way. He's basically disowned her. He disowned her in 2020. For people who don't know, when she went on and started mocking, "Oh, I'm Jamaican. Of course I smoke weed." He was like, "You disgraced us. You disgraced our family name." He put an article, an op-ed out in the local newspaper, and basically called her a disgrace, who shamed the entire Jamaican people. Could you imagine if that was a Republican's daddy, dude?
Never went. I mean, to Jamaica. I mean, her father was out of the picture very early. She grew up with her Indian mother. She grew up, Hindu. Grew up in Canada, in Montreal. Was speaking French. She's identified as Indian her whole life. In order to get some black bona fides, she goes to Howard. Then she gets connected to Willie Brown in San Francisco, and so forth. But she's not. She's like Barack Obama, but less skilled at Barack Obama was at trying to build black bona fides. Obama goes to the big black church in the South Side of Chicago.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, at least Obama, dude. Obama has more time than her in an American ghetto. Obama has more time than her in a Southern Baptist black church.
And Michelle Obama is a real black woman, right?
Right. Come on.
The good and bad that comes with that in terms of public image. But so Kamala Harris is married.
She's not an African American and does not have the African American experience. And I'll tell you what. The margin with black men didn't budge.
Her husband's Jewish. Her husband's a wealthy Jewish lawyer
who banged the nanny and aborted the baby.
Another Jewish lawyer to be VP. I mean, I think from a branding perspective,
so bad.
There's just problems there
with no children.
And has no kids of her own.
No children.
It's not like you want his kids running around. I mean, his kids look like total whack jobs.
Well, they killed one. Let's be real. They killed one that he had outside of the marriage.
He banged the nanny.
Yeah, they aborted it. Get rid of that.
Got an abortion there.
We can't have that embarrassment around. Get rid of that.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like that was where the Democratic narrative mistake to talk about catless kids.
So stupid.
Don't get anywhere near that topic.
You're going to argue with JD Vance about being a parent when you don't even have any children, and the only one your husband had when it was anywhere, moving on to you, because his marriage was it was when he cheated on his first wife and aborted the baby. And how did you deal? So would you rather hear a father, even if, of course, he was having an internal dialogue, but which one's worse parenting, bro? I mean, telling your kid to shut the hell up. I'm on an important phone call. Or if he even did, which obviously I think he was saying it was like an internal conversation, but even if he did, it doesn't matter. Is that worse than ruining your marriage and ruining your children's life, their home, when they're teenagers? And then, I mean, you can't talk to me about who's a good parent and who's not when you kill one of them. I mean, I just, you can't. I'm sorry.
Back to your earlier point,
bad idea to talk about.
Lieberman branding wise hurt Gore.
It
did not help Gore.
No.
And in the same way, Shapiro branding on the national stage probably hurts Harris.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's just say it open. Josh Shapiro is Jewish and Joe Lieberman was Jewish. There is a strain of anti-Semites in the Democratic Party, has been for decades.
And the other way I put it,
not a good idea.
There's also within the American electorate, the more foreign you are. That's why I always describe Obama's problem. I was like, when I was telling people on the international stage and the rest, it's like the resistance to Obama, mostly policy driven in the United States. But I was like, secondarily, it had nothing to do with him being black. It had everything to do with he came across as foreign.
Yeah.
He didn't come across as an identifiable American because he didn't come from the African-American tradition. He didn't speak like that, act like that, behave like that. He didn't sound like Martin Luther King. He didn't sound like Jesse Jackson. He sounded somebody just weird and foreign, of which, the Hussein part. That's why Hillary jumped on it and used it so effectively.
Which they forever are going to deny that she did. It's all Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton started that. This is completely so ridiculous. Well, her campaign did.
And it was because it was effective. And I think with Harris, you have why does she have this likability problem whenever people are exposed to her over extended periods of time to such a degree? They're trying to keep a lid on her currently. They're trying to run the Biden basement strategy all over again, but for a different reason. For Biden, it was his declining mental health. They had to hide him. But for Harris, it's because it's not just that her answers. She explains the economic problems. Inflation is when prices are going up. And when prices are going up, it's harder to afford things. That's her solution on inflation. She just wanted everybody to know. That's what inflation is. Like you're talking to a 4-year-old. I mean, it's unbelievable. The cloud
I got a clip I
is this thing in the sky. You see these clouds? That's where your data is.
Don't say the next one.
It's in the sky. Did you know that? Isn't that amazing?
Listen.
You really can't. I've told people for years, she's the dumbest person I ever dealt with in court.
She's stupid.
Just dumb, just beyond dumb. Like, you're dumb in ways you step back and you're like, what? I mean, dumb in ways that Joe Biden's been losing his mind. This is like dumb.
But he was socially sharp. Oh, he was.
Yes.
He was
used to be absolutely
sharp, but
charismatic. He was an Irish bartender.
Yes, yeah, and he totally used those skills to stomp all over Paul Ryan in that VP debate. Here's Kamala Harris. This one is one of my favorite. You already got through 2 that I had set up, but here's Kamala Harris. Here's another one. All right, and this is the stuff they're going to try to hide her from because she can make mistakes like this. But when the clip is done, I want to explore this with you. We've talked about this before, but I was on the phone with somebody before the show saying that you and I had brought this up. Can they hide her the way they hid Biden? Because the incumbent party was the one responsible for things right now in 2020, excuse me. Right. And so Biden was able to hide, but she's the incumbent party now. And it's very weird to hide them. And, look what happened with the prisoner
things
exchange.
Are bad. Like, if we were running our campaign, I have her out there. I try to get some deals done in Ukraine to make it look like she brought the peace accord.
Well, she was supposed to take the credit for the prisoner swap, and it went bad. Everything went awry.
Yeah, that was always just a mistake. Because Biden's trades.
Let's give them psycho killer Cascades. This is just that's Obama era stuff though, bro, and what people can be like became accustomed to just groveling.
I'll give you a journalist for 3 assassins.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Yeah, it's fair trade. Let's listen to Kamala. Here's one of her other shining moments.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
What a genius, Robert. What a
Yes,
boy.
no doubt about it. So
Oh
I
my
think
God.
Shapiro doesn't help the brand. There's nothing about him that I think positively reinforces the
Oops.
brand.
Sorry.
Unless your focus is really losing Jewish votes, to be blunt about it. I mean, I think maybe he could stabilize the perception of Harris in the Jewish community if she picked a pro-Israeli a Jewish vice president, right? But if that's where you're at, you're in trouble in the Democratic Party. Now, the last topic I was going to cover was we're going to try to get to is who is voting for Kennedy, and
Yeah, I got
from
this stuff right
when, because I think you're still the only person to poll. Are you considering voting for Biden?
Yeah, I got to pull up the
voting
four
for
freedoms.
Kennedy, considering voting for Trump, and I think Kennedy has the greatest range. Like, I think Trump is 40 to 50, somewhere in that range. Kamala Harris, 40 to 50, somewhere in that range. I think she'll be on the lower side, he on the higher side. But I think Kennedy is anywhere from 4% to 24%. I mean, in terms of the variation. Now, certain things I think would have to break his way for it to surge up. And my other premise with Kennedy is that he can hurt different candidates in different states in different ways.
Yeah, he can.
If he were to surge, he could make some states surprisingly competitive, depending on where he surged. I mean, I even saw a poll earlier this year had Hawaii in low single digits with Kennedy on the ballot. I mean,
well, this is what I'm thinking. I mean, I'll tell you, there's like some of Rust Belt areas where I think Kennedy could hurt Donald Trump. But on the flip side of that, you take a state like Minnesota, you were talking about the Iron Range before, and there are other areas where there are, especially if she picked Shapiro, frankly, but there are other, areas of Minnesota where you could foresee some Democratic voters not wanting to vote for Harris, but they're not ready to vote for a Republican yet. That realignment just has not happened. But in the flip side of that, Pennsylvania, like I think without a doubt, it's clear to me that he hurts Trump in Pennsylvania. But let me bring this up. I thought I created a separate crosstab to do this, didn't I? The Kennedy vote. Who's considering? I thought I did a separate crosstab. I'll make another one if I got to, but
yeah,
I thought I did.
At least originally.
I did. I think,
right? I think two things are present. One is in the sort of national dialogue, there's still a lot of misunderstanding as to who is considering Kennedy, and it reflects certain Democratic weaknesses. The second aspect is, we use 68 as an example, or to a lesser degree 92. But 68, I think, is the most compelling one. Was how Nixon handled the Wallace vote. And my view is, if you're in Trump or Harris's camp, that you could pick off a lot of Kennedy voters or people considering Kennedy by finding what issues you align with, because you have an ace card in your pocket, which is the public perception is you can win. The public perception will likely stay that they don't think Kennedy can win. And if Kennedy's not included in the debates, like, for example, in 1992.
That's the game they play all the time.
Even with the inclusion of the debates that boosted Perot, had people still believed he could win, the exit polls showed Perot actually would have won in 1992 because there was a deep dissatisfaction still with both Clinton and Bush. And
powerful perception. A very powerful perception. They convinced Democratic voters in 2020 that Bernie Sanders could not win. They did not want Joe Biden. That wasn't the game. The game. I mean, the exit polls confirmed it, but we were polling people who were saying, actually, I don't want Joe Biden, but I'm going to vote for him because I don't think he can win. That was like the majority of Joe Biden's vote, his primary vote. They didn't want him. It was sad. It was actually one of the saddest things I've ever seen in polling. People telling me, I don't want to vote for this person, but I believe BS media propaganda.
At the time, it's a warning of trouble in his administration, trouble getting reelected when you're rejected by the voters that see you up close and personal, like he was in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada.
That's right.
But so I think, so if you're looking at, there's how did Nixon handle the Wallace vote. So Wallace on paper is coming from the Democratic Party, is taking from the people who voted Democratic in 1964, in some case outside of the Deep South. And the key was where Wallace was getting votes outside of the Deep South. So, and this included North Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri. This included Illinois. This included Wisconsin. This included Michigan. This included Pennsylvania. And at points, Wallace was doing really well. And I thought the genius part of how Nixon handled it was in the first stage of Wallace's campaign, he let Wallace beat up Humphrey amongst traditionally Democratic blue-collar voters to soften their support. And then what he did is he found the issues that he overlapped with Wallace on, stole those issues, campaigned on them in the fall.
Yeah.
And then his pitch in the end was, hey, on issues you really care about, I share the same approach, law and order, famously, and I'm going to get something done in Vietnam. But I can win, unlike Wallace. And if you follow the polls, Wallace's working class support in the border states and in the industrial North
See where you're going with this.
He lost over half. So if you look at where Kennedy, I think Trump, well, and to a degree, Harris. I'll explain in a second why I think Harris won't do it. But I think Trump has more control over Kennedy's vote than Kennedy does. I think because Trump can say, I can win in ways that likely will be a much more effective narration come November, that all he's got to do is find those issues that Kennedy voters like, that are considering voting for Kennedy. And that are and I think it's somewhere around, depending on where you get the survey, I think ours somewhere, what was it, 20% or so people, what number said they were considering voting?
Almost about 29%, actually higher.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So 30% of the country saying, I'm thinking about possibly voting for Robert Kennedy. If you look at where that vote gets, now, and then there's a portion that I would say is just Democratic vote from Kennedy. Like if Harris was smart, she would try to find ways to reach out. Now, they won't on the Democratic side.
No, they're not going to do it.
They're not going to reach out on the war issue. They're not going to reach out on food issues. They're not going to reach out on medical issues. They're not going to reach out even on the sort of corporate capture issues, because she's a neoliberal. She can't talk about those issues either. So even the environmental issues because of the kind of younger voter
I wanted to do. That's right. Issues. Yeah, that's what I wanted to cross it with. Keep going. Sorry, I just reminded me that actually I wanted some of these issues to be in the crosstabs, because I think this is something we should put out for people to see. I mean, obviously support prohibiting social media companies from censoring users, because I could, and it's going to take me a minute. I thought I did this before and I apologize I didn't, but what you're going to see when you look at this, guys, is that there's overlap with people who are considering Trump and Kennedy. They're overlapping on these issues that, like, honestly, not enough people are talking about. Trump started at least with one of them, Robert. He did. But like, if she picked Shapiro, oh my God, the opportunity to blow that up is being handed on a silver platter. The food aspect, the food freedom aspect, the big pharma aspect, all of this gets thrown on the table. And it's like a golden door that opens, like, walk through it, there's Valhalla. Like, I mean, I don't know, man. I think he's a little distracted right now. I know Trump voters hate it when I give people that opinion, but it's true.
We're seeing glimpses of it. I think if Harris picks Shapiro, it'll enhance this opportunity for Trump and Vance.
Yeah.
Because it puts a priority, it puts a big spotlight on it. So we've seen Trump, Trump has some cognizance of this, because after the assassination attempt, he has the conversation with Robert Kennedy, whether I think he was the one probably that was partially behind that leak, but that's just my view. Because it helped him. Didn't really help Kennedy to have that leak. The leak being, hey, you know what? I have great respect for Robert Kennedy, but Trump articulated the vaccine issue as well as anybody has.
Yep.
Because he was like, man, they're giving these little 10-pound babies drugs that look like you're putting them into a 1,000-pound horse. That can't work out well, right? I mean, that's a brilliant visual and quickness of, hold on a second, something's AWOL. right? Kennedy will give you all the data and the rest, but Trump just narrows it to a simple, quick visual image. Why are we giving like these big horse sterilizers to little 10-pound babies? Maybe that's bad, right? Brilliant imagery. He gets that leak, and that he's going to set up a vaccine commission to study. So he's starting to get there. The medical freedom question that we tested that was off the charts favorable across the country, but it was particularly big amongst Kennedy voters and voters considering Kennedy, especially that 30% of the country was, do you support holding drug companies responsible if their vaccines cause injury?
Look at that.
So if Trump embraces that issue, 2/3 of almost everybody who's considering Kennedy or Trump goes to Trump, especially come election day. Then the other issue we got is the issue that Josh Shapiro puts a big, massive spotlight on if he's picked as VP, which is food freedom, which is we ask people, do you think you should have the right to buy food directly from the producer of that food, the farmer, without government permission? Again, that number was off the charts high as a significant issue, a voting issue, etc. But especially amongst Trump Kennedy voters considering Kennedy, it is an intensely personal issue with those voters. And what does Shapiro's nomination do? There's a lot of other Shapiro scandals we'll get to. There's other murder cases, suicide cases, so-called suicide cases, stab yourself 9 times, suicide kind of case. There's sexual harassment cases. There's money laundering involving the teachers' unions with illegal donations cases. There's what happened in the 2020 election cases that Shapiro bragged about fixing in the election even before it occurred in Pennsylvania. But one of the biggest scandals he has, a case I have this week in Pennsylvania, which is Shapiro has been waging war on Amish farmers and small farmers in Pennsylvania. And you mentioned Dutch country was an area that Shapiro overperformed in.
He did.
Well, he ain't going to overperform if he's on the ticket in 2024.
I know it's hard for people to see, but I'm trying to show everything that Robert's saying. I'm trying to scroll through so you can see it. 411 people that we interviewed out of the 578 who were considering voting for Kennedy. That's just right there. That's holding the pharmaceutical companies accountable. That's what that one is, right? I mean, just huge opportunity there. And then the food. Go ahead though, because I'll let you. I mean, Trump would be a fool not to pick this up. I mean, absolutely.
The biggest political scandal involving food freedom in America in the last 2 years has been the state of Pennsylvania's war on their small farmers. And Pennsylvania is the heart of dairy country, arguably in the world, but definitely in America.
Yeah.
They have lost over half of their dairy farmers over the last 10 years and forecast to lose another half over the next 10 years. Trump, to his credit, has started to tweet about this.
Yeah, a little bit.
He started to say, MAGA means make agriculture great again. Did that 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, he says, look at what's happening to small farmers and family farmers. They're crushing them. So he's starting to get there. But what Shapiro has done is been in the pocket of big corporate agriculture. And the biggest food freedom case in the country for the last 2 years has been the case of Amish farmer Amos Miller. Amos Miller is one of the most popular family farmers in the country, has provided food to tens of thousands of Americans, millions of food products over the last quarter century. He is a 5th generation Amish farmer in Lancaster County, deeply supported within the Amish community, which is reporting record levels of voting registration since the attack on Amos Miller began by the state of Pennsylvania. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to completely shut him down. They raided, the Shapiro's administration raided his farm. They stole, frankly, all of his food, detained every food item that was there.
They stole
ordered it destroyed, including he was not allowed to feed his own family his own farmed food. He was not even allowed to feed his pigs his own farmed food, which could lead to the pigs starving so he doesn't have a farm anymore. Internal emails and communication showed that they were conspiring with advocates of big corporate agriculture at Penn State and elsewhere, bragging about, Amos Miller was going to be in handcuffs. Amos Miller's farm was going to be foreclosed on and bankrupted because he is the most successful family farmer of that kind in the entire state. His customer satisfaction rate is off the charts. You're talking about the government's own officials on the stand admitted in an evidentiary hearing that in 25 years of distributing tens of millions of food products to tens of thousands of Americans, not one customer had ever filed any complaint about any aspect of Amos Miller's food. Not its packaging, not its distribution, not its quality, nothing. Not one single complaint. Highest customer satisfaction rate of any family farmer of that scale in the country. And yet, right now, the state of Pennsylvania, after doing all those things they did before, they've already prohibited him from distributing any raw milk product in the state of Pennsylvania. But the court recognized it had no constitutional right to prohibit him from distributing it around the country. AmosMillerOrganicFarm.com is where you can see his food products. Right now, they are asking the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania to shut him down completely and prohibit him from distributing food to anybody anywhere. And by the way, they define the word sell food as simply distribute food. In fact, it's the biggest power grab of any agency anywhere in the country. Pennsylvania
Meanwhile, this is how this guy did in Dutch country. He barely lost Lancaster, 2 points. And he lost Cumberland, and he won Cumberland by looks like, I mean, roughly, let's call it 8, right? Let's round and call it 8. Trump won Cumberland by 12 points, and of course he won Lancaster by 16. And it's like, this is the guy they're saying is going to be so strong, as if that has had there's no change in those margins. Especially if he grabs that issue and runs with it, I would make Amos Miller even more. I would make him even more famous.
I would make him part of the stump speech.
He would be on the stump. Absolutely.
In Harris Shapiro's world, basically, you take everything Vance is talking about now, about jobs, employment, immigration, disaster, AWOL, presidency and vice presidency, and just add family farmers will be gone in America if Harris and Shapiro are because Shapiro is trying to kill family farmers in the state of Pennsylvania.
Shapiro won Berks too.
There's been more family farmers lost under his governorship than anywhere in the history of the state. And you see it, and there's other examples. I mean, he illegally imprisoned, illegally jailed farm workers that worked on Amish farms without charging them with a crime, without even making them parties to a case. Just had a judge issue an order that was completely illegal that locked them up for 30 days and dragged them off to jail. Completely illegal. And you can read that in the cases of Wentworth and Her. So not only these Shapiro scandals, but these are issues that resonate nationwide. Abuse of power, lawfare. Shapiro's one of the worst in the country at that. But you add to it that not only are you not going to have a job, you're not going to have access to food from family farmers anymore. You're going to be stuck with corporatized, industrialized, monopolized, chemical-laced crap food from under the Harris Shapiro regime because they're bought and paid for by big corporate agriculture and the neoliberal interests. And Trump can be the candidate of family farmers. Trump can be the candidate of your right to have access to that food from that family farm at your local farmer's market. Trump can be part of the food freedom movement by highlighting how Shapiro proves what Harris will be like as president. Because if Harris and Shapiro are in, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture head that I call Pope Redding, because unless he blesses your food, you can't eat it. He believes he will be Secretary of Agriculture. He's told people that if Shapiro gets in, he will be the next Secretary of Agriculture. It will destroy food freedom in this country. It will wipe out the family farmer in this country. Yeah, and as Thomas Jefferson said, and our founder said, the heart of America is food freedom. And then you get a little added bonus if you're Trump. There's 60,000 plus Amish in Pennsylvania. If you get them registered, if you get them, say, look, I'm going to defend the Amish because the Amish way of life is the same way of life our founding fathers. It's the closest to the founding fathers' lifestyle of anybody. And I'm going to defend the Amish way of life. I'm not going to let them be locked up and imprisoned and stripped of their liberties and their rights the way Governor Shapiro is doing in the state of Pennsylvania at multiple levels in multiple ways. With Amos Miller is the one example, but just one of many. And then you get the Amish vote, and that by itself can put you over the top in Pennsylvania independent of all the people that really love food freedom across the country. People love family farmers. There's a reason why
they
farm
do.
aid's always been real popular.
They do.
And
I
they
had
want their
no
food
idea.
when they can from family farmers, not from the big corporate industrial lies, because they're realizing their bodies are deteriorating. Their food is their medicine for a lot of people and ordinary people. So I think so. Yeah, you can show the polling data.
Yeah,
Food
I'm trying to
freedom-
show it as you're talking because I got that was like one of the biggest, just like honestly, one of the biggest surprises. Whoops, I was trying to put it up with us. One of the biggest surprises. I had no idea that it was that supported by everyone. I just expected there to be more authoritarian leaning liberals who would not like that. But then I guess it dawned on me after, and I was talking to Laura when we were fielding these results. She's like, you're always like trying to explain to people the Vermont rural liberal I brought up before. It was like, even they are like huge into this stuff, and you take that away. I mean, for people who can't read that, it's a series of questions we ask. Please tell us whether you would be more or less likely to support a candidate who held each of the following positions, or if it would have no impact, and supports a right to buy food directly from farmers without government permission, which was so important to say, without government permission. And 58% said it would make them more likely, and 12% less likely, 31 no impact. That's a huge issue. And then we had another one where just flatly asking whether or not they agree or disagree. And we actually even got I guess probably this is one of when you ask a scale, a more or less likely, or you ask a Likert scale kind of format like this is, right? So it's like, should Americans be allowed to buy food directly from farmers without getting government permission? A little bit different worded and different kind of like response format. 50% strongly agreed, 28.3% somewhat agreed. I just can't. I mean, the small family farmer issue, this is a Yowman country. I mean, the small family farmer issue was much, much bigger than I thought. When I thought about it, I was thinking like, it's big in Iowa. It makes sense. Like Trump, it does well there, stuff like that. I did not expect it to be this like broadly popular. This is a huge, huge downside for him. He would have to run away from things his administration is currently doing. Like, how would he be able to argue against that? And then if you're ever going to motivate these people to vote, it's if you can highlight an example of when literally it's either you, because they don't like to participate in the process, folks, but some of them do. But it's like you could, if there's anything that you could show them that's not ethereal, right? Like ethereal, like they're a threat to your way of life. They believe in this, and that's a threat to your way of life. This is actually something that's happening. This is going on, and the community knows it's going on. And then you take a case like this and make it and blow it up into like a big thing, and you bring the guy on the stage, man. You bring him up, and I just don't know like what other. I mean, honestly, it's like getting a free like field goal at the end of the Super Bowl. I mean, honestly, it's just like. So again, I just thought this would be appealed to certain people, certain kind of people, and it's not. And I don't think he does enough talking about this kind of stuff. I really don't. But again, that's
it goes to the core of the problems that people have with Harris and the Democratic Party message, and it just amplifies it. And
government knows best. Yeah,
that would be Shapiro's answer on the stage.
Yeah, we know better.
We, the government, know better what's safe for you. We, the government, know what's good for you. You don't. You don't get to decide what goes into your body. We, the government, do.
And remember, Trump say they've been there for hundreds of years before you were even born. Like J.D. Vance could say, they've been there for hundreds of years before you were even born. You're going to tell them what's better for them? Like, it would just be...
Yeah. It's perfect. I mean, it's perfect. Dude, this guy wants to take away your ability to eat food from an Amish farmer that's been doing this for a quarter century, and he's a fifth generation Amish farmer. And then you tie it right back into medical freedom. Shapiro supported vaccine mandates.
Everyone in the tri-state area goes to Lancaster sometime during the year to get cookies, furniture, foods, butters. I mean, geez, I know somebody who came home with logs of Amish butter every year. The cookies are like a fan favorite. I mean, there's so much. That is not even like a partisan thing. You're going to have people who never even thought about it like that, scratching their heads and going, wait, what? And by the way, you want to help in New Jersey? I'm not kidding. Jersey's the Garden State. You want New Jersey to be close? New Jersey supplies 80% of the world's eggplant. When we think about New Jersey, we think of like Patterson, right? And Bergen County and stuff like that. That's not all New Jersey is. There's a whole entire part of the state nobody ever really sees. Last place I lived in New Jersey, my dad was getting crazy when I was young. He was not, getting crazy, always was crazy. But, he used to go from house to house, make them better. He always loved old houses and he'd flip them. We lived in the 3 acres with this huge family farm, the Wangs around us. Wu-Tang's mansion was up the block. It was crazy. It was awesome. It was awesome. And they were so cool. Not even joking. People who are from the area, you're going to know what I'm talking about. The Millstone Mansion, baby. Oh, yeah. Anyway, it was like that is a huge part of New Jersey that nobody knows about. And there's an educated component there. They're old school kind of Republicans. You want to try to win some of them back. You want to try to appeal to them. You do it, and on these issues that seem like they're on the periphery, but really get people to ask themselves a greater question. And it affirms the greater argument you're trying to make. Look, they thought they knew better when it came to this. Look at what happened. They thought they knew better with the economy. They thought they knew better with everything they do turns to shit. Now this is a great... between
the government to run everything. It goes back to some of Reagan's core popularity in the early 80s when he just simplified things about they want the government to run your life. I want you to run your life.
Yeah.
And we've seen practice when the government runs your life, they inject you with a vaccine that you don't want that has all these negative side effects.
Whoa, speaking of which,
when the government runs your life, you can't even buy food from an Amish farmer. That's been accessible to everybody since the founding of the country. When the government runs your life, you get uncontrolled border, you get war abroad, you get disaster at home, you get an economy that's imploding. But it ties it into a real concrete example of a policy that Shapiro has been a disaster on, that brands Harris by extension, and it ties to something to everybody, every day's accessible life. Because what do people do every single day? They buy food. This is the reason why I think it was so intensely popular, more than we even anticipated when we did the survey.
I was stunned.
When we did the crosstabs, amongst people considering Kennedy, it's off the charts.
Yeah.
So it's the easiest way for Trump to steal Kennedy votes. It's the easiest way for Trump to destroy the Shapiro VP branding of Harris. And it's a great way to take back Pennsylvania, which Democrats admit they've got to get if they have any shot at all.
Kennedy's vote, out of the 578 people that were, because I didn't explain this right, out of the 578 people who said that they were considering Kennedy, 411 of them said they would be more inclined to support Trump if he did that, if he supported that food. And honestly, I just read the way it broke down, but would you consider voting for each of the, if he supported a right to buy food directly from from farmers, rather than big corporations without seeking government approval, without requiring government approval.
By the way, it was the federal law until 1967. Until 1967, you did not, the farmer didn't have to have a federal permit to sell you food. It directly from it. A true farm to table. Because of the farm to table movement,
there's a whole movement in Florida, farm to table. There's a whole movement big.
It crosses demographics. You're seeing
the school systems, they're liberals like crazy and they love it.
And what's fascinating is I see these sort of caricatures both within the Democratic and Republican parties of who's voting for Kennedy. It's not his dad's Kennedy vote.
No,
it's younger, it's Hispanic and African American, it trends women, it trends a wide range of demographics. The one group that's killing him is boomers. Boomers have no interest, least interest in him. But amongst these very swing groups that we've been talking about, the ones Harris has got to win back that Biden has lost, issues like food and medical freedom are off the charts high because it impacts their daily lives in a tangible way. And these are voters that aren't always skeptical of the government in the sense of the government intervention. They might think, send me a stimmy check, for example.
Yeah.
But this translates it to them in ways that work because this is the government taking away your family's right to decide what goes into your family's on your family's dinner table. This is about what goes into your body or your kid's body. Vermont is saying it's okay to force vaccines on the kids without the parents knowing about it.
Meanwhile, let me play this because I don't know how he doesn't drum this back up. You know, like there are several clips that I don't know what Trump's waiting on with the ads. It's like you're either going to define her, Trump, or they're going to redefine her. And that's what the race is right now. You cannot wait till September for that. Ballots go out in Minnesota pretty soon, in case you don't know. Like this is, and that's why you're not going to see her debate, bro. Not until those ballots go out in Minnesota. It's not going to happen. Watch, mark my words. Even in North Carolina, soon you're going to be able to request a ballot very early. But do you remember this? Speaking of tying into the drug company aspect of this, the medical freedom aspect of this is how unserious she is. I mean, I don't know how, for people who don't remember this clip, check this out.
Before the election, would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
If and when the vaccine comes, and it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be and the trials that are needed to be done. When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay. And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency. You got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus, this is a safe vaccine. If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it. If Donald Trump can't give answers in administration.
This goes on for another 15 seconds. All right, with him and Harris doing this.
Right. Yeah, because people forget.
Whatever's whatever. You want to steal Kennedy's voters?
They ran as vaccine skeptics.
That's right.
Biden and Harris. And that's why, and then they turned around and did 180 and mandated and enforced it on everybody.
So
between the food freedom and medical freedom issues that are hot button issues with Kennedy voters, Trump can take all that he wants by just embracing these two issues.
And I'm even saying too, I think there's like an opportunity beyond even those Kennedy voters.
Oh,
there's an opportunity with people who are educated whites who were getting nuts on they were over Biden. Kamala's like a new shiny toy for them. So now they're going to consider supporting her. But they were thinking of third party. They were floating. They were undecided. And they're not typical people who have raced to Donald Trump. This is obviously two angles that are pretty easy because even they are overly, you could really thread the needle here, man. And they're overly supportive of these things and make them look like hypocrites at the same time. And reinforce the obviously that you're reinforcing the entire narrative that you want to reinforce because they're on this Kamala is just whatever's political expedient narrative. Well, both of them do that because you're going to force her and if it is Shapiro, you're going to force them to flip flop and denounce things they've both said and done. It's just it's going to come across so inauthentic. And I'm not saying you make this is a top issue for the campaign. I'm saying this is easily something you could adopt and roll with. Like I said last week, there are things, Robert, that they should have been jumping on. It doesn't need to be central to the campaign, but where's the ad showing two female Olympic boxers getting the shit kicked out of them by men and then have Kamala Harris go, oh yeah, I definitely think we need to have a conversation about allowing men to compete with women's sports, or allowing trans women. All those things.
The other component with this
what is
you could also run these ads and target the messaging in such a way that you divorce, for example, there's a smart PAC that's organized to run quote unquote anti-Kennedy ads, but this is a much smarter approach. They're running ads highlighting all the different views of Kennedy's that align with young progressives, right? And so they're
trying to take that back. Right.
Well, my view is what your data showed is there's a group of Democratic leaning voters that are uncomfortable with Kamala Harris, but some portion of that vote will probably never be able to stomach marking Trump on the ballot box for various psychological and other reasons. That group, you also highlight the Kennedy aspects to that group because you increase the Kennedy share that comes out of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I would say right now, the way things are trending,
it's kind of what
his campaign is trending in that direction. His campaign is increasingly trending towards, he got a huge volunteer boost after Harris was announced, right? I was like, oh, that's interesting. Those are going to be young voters that are Democratic leaning voters that don't like Harris, that have some doubts specific, unique to Harris. And if you're Trump world, I would amplify that to that voting constituency.
Democrats
So-
did that against Republicans in the 2018 midterm elections. There were a ton of like third parties and independents, and they literally boosted them with ads on Facebook. We found out later they boosted them so that like 3% would peel off to that independent. So like in a close district, the Democrat was going to win it like 51 to like 45, with the independent getting the rest. If that independent wasn't there, those voters would have went to the Republican Party. They did that. Like they took voters that were inclined to vote Republican but were unhappy, and they gave them another choice.
Well,
and they peeled them away. They did. It worked. It was smart.
And what did we find when we looked at the people that felt they were discriminated against or knew someone close to them that suffered a serious injury or disability or death from the vaccine and was very big on medical freedom? It was groups like Hispanic women. And where does Harris have a huge problem? He's got a huge problem with Hispanic women. And so there are ways to use Kennedy's messaging, if you're in Trump camp, to really amplify losses to Harris and gains to Trump. If you run it right, I still believe Trump controls what more of Kennedy's vote than Kennedy does,
because he has a bigger microphone. And this is, we'll agree with Harry Enton on one thing. I'm not sure it's going to be permanent for Harris, but Trump's favorability and image increasing hurts any third party. And Harris is, well, not any, certain third party. And then Harris was very unpopular, which was helping third parties. Like the worst thing that can happen to a third party is people are happy with the two choices they have for two parties. And I'm not sure that's permanent. And there'll be more opportunities for Harris to like reintroduce herself to Americans that she's probably not going to handle well. And then that's going to leave people going, oh, what am I going to do?
You're absolutely right.
You know what I mean?
Going back to Kerry, remember they defined him with the Swift Boat campaign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's amazing that certain people affiliated with that have parlayed that into certain positions at the Republican National Committee. They probably don't currently deserve. But that's another story for another day. It's get ahead, like define Kamala right now. I mean, in your Trump world, she's an enemy of food freedom, an enemy of medical freedom, an enemy of financial freedom. Look at what Trump did on Bitcoin, right? Kennedy was out in front of that issue. Trump jumped all over it over the last 2 months, and all of a sudden he's got a bunch of social media support, financial support, increased amongst those
Silicon Valley support he got over that. By the way, there was another one
and we said 2 months ago, 3 months ago, jump on financial freedom, jump on medical freedom and food freedom. And he's gone there a little bit on medical and food freedom, but he can just go a lot further. And if Shapiro's the nominee, it's the perfect window of opportunity for them to hammer home these issues.
It is. It is. And you're going to have some, I mean, honestly, folks, think about it. You're going to have like some, like, I'm on an organic small farmer only diet liberal in Montgomery County that may not be happy with Kamala Harris. There are, by the way, like Hispanic women were the most, I don't want to say soft, but like they had the highest number of initial undecideds when we just pegged Trump against Harris. Like you had the voters who were going to go to Trump. Most of them did, and then a couple of more that did when we leaned them. Then there was like 17.6, if I remember correctly. I'm usually pretty good at remembering these. 17.6% off the jump were undecided. And then when you lean them, Harris did get some, but you could tell they just didn't like, they don't like her. They don't like her. And she is, her image rebound was not strong, as strong as some other groups when it came to like Hispanic women. And you could see them, they're kind of like marginalized in those white suburbs. Like I can kind of see that completely happening. Maybe they're not ready to vote for Trump yet. Maybe they're not. But they certainly aren't in love with Kamala Harris. So you push them in another direction. That's 4D chess kind of shit, though. I get that, man. I do. It makes sense. But it's 420. Smoke them if you got them. Go ahead, though. Repeat your thought. You were going to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we've given good advice constantly, so that if Trump world takes it, they're going to win with ease, given the electoral environment is so favorable. All they got to do is push it just right over the edge, and they're it. So run on food freedom, run on medical freedom, Add it to financial freedom. There's easy ways to do so. Your base loves it. You can take all the Kennedy votes. There are people considering voting for Kennedy. You can push other Harris votes towards Kennedy because of the issue, because of their dissatisfaction with it. It's an easy winner, smart winner. All you got to, and hopefully Harris takes the bait and puts Shapiro on the ticket, because that creates the spotlight opportunity we all need to see these issues highlighted if you're in the Trump camp.
Vice presidential nominees do not have the impact that people think they do, and we're just going to end it there. They just don't. We go through this every 4 years. We get the same conversations. By the way, Larry Sabato, I spent years giving lectures and doing interviews with the media talking about how VP selections don't matter. All of a sudden, he's changed his tune as well. So it's unbelievable how these people have absolutely no consistency and no core at all, period. Tell people where they can find you, though, Robert.
Yeah, so we'll be putting up all the political bets throughout the election cycle, giving where to bet, when to bet, how much to bet, what to bet at sportspicks.locals.com. And if you subscribe today, you can put in the discount code, all caps football. You get more than basically you get like what is equivalent of 70% off. But it's half off the annual price, which is already discounted 25%.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity to go to sportspicks.locals.com. We'll put out over 2,000 picks across all political and sports betting markets. And it should be an interesting and I think very profitable election season.
And I will upload the video to everybody who didn't get it on Rumble and Locals. And I don't know what the hell happened again here, but we got to test something out anyway, a new way to go. So maybe we're just gonna have to do something different, Robert, because it's like the second time in 3 weeks this happened. This is ridiculous now. Or second time in 2 weeks. That's crazy. But we'll do that. You can follow me on Locals right down below my name. And of course, the Public Polling Project. The link is in the description. You guys keep doing it like this, because we've been doing all right with fundraising. Keep doing it like this. We may get to a point we can poll every week. I'm not even kidding. Like, you guys raised like $3,000 in the last 5 days or something. That's not bad at all. And if you're going to consistently do that, I'll kick the rest of the money in. I'll do it just to make sure, because it's like, I like to be as fresh as possible, Robert. It's like, I saw Kamala go up, that Sunday, go up on Monday. Very clearly, I could see the response bias. By Tuesday, it was all over. The party was over. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it never was like with some of these other pollsters. But if we had continued polling throughout the week, we'd have been able to show people much more clearly, here's your response bias. Okay, notice it went back from 58% female to 53% female. All right, and other groups. So, I mean, guys, keep it up. You're doing a great job. And of course, we thank you for it. Thanks as always, brother. We'll be back, right? I mean, I don't know. We'll take it week by week, but
we'll be back next Monday.
Okay,
cool. Back next Monday with another what are the odds? We'll probably have the VP pick by then.
Yeah.
So that hopefully it's Shapiro, so we can highlight these issues, get Trump camp in tune, and continue to make good predictions and forecasts and explanations as we go along.
All the best, brother. See you soon. Thanks for everybody who joined. See you next Monday. We're out. Or as we say, deuces. Time to upload to Locals and Rumble. Sorry about that. I'll be ending those streams right now.